It's 7 o'clock, so we might get started in a second, everyone. Councillor Hughes, we might get started, sorry. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Infrastructure and Environmental Services Committee meeting. My name's Ethan White. I'm the new presiding member of this committee. I'd like to welcome all members here, staff, community members and invited guests that are presenting tonight. I just want to quickly take this opportunity to thank Deputy Mayor Cody Davies for his time in the position as chair over the past 12 months or so, and look forward to starting this new term on this committee. We'll start off with the statement of acknowledgement. We would like to acknowledge this land that we meet on today is the traditional lands for the Kaurna people, and that we respect their spiritual relationship with their country. We also acknowledge the Kaurna people as the custodians of the Greater Adelaide region, and that their cultural heritage and beliefs are still important to the living Kaurna people today. Attendance record roll call. We have everyone here. Mayor Redmond's let me know she's going to be running about half an hour late, so we'll put her down as an apology for now. And I haven't heard from Councillor Shanks, so we'll put him as a non-attendance for now, unless anyone else has heard from him. No, he might be just running a bit late, but we'll pop Councillor Shanks as non-attendance for now. Is there any motions to grant leave of absence, members? No. There is no current leave of absence. And non-attendance, Councillor Shanks. Public open forum, we have one request from Mr Adrian Shackley. Mr Shackley, if you'd like to come up to the lectern, you're going to be speaking regarding the environment grants, and we'll give you 5 minutes to speak, and we'll give you a 30-second warning just before your time's up. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Looks like I've already spoken. Thank you. Yes, I wasn't planning on coming, but just to say a few things. On behalf of Gawler Environment and Heritage Association, I've been working with the council over the last few weeks on some grant applications, one of which is on your agenda tonight, which is good. Good to see the council putting some effort into biodiversity sort of type activities. So there were two other grants related to council land that were being looked at. The main one that I've been involved in is at Reed Reserve, trying to work out a plan down there for restoring sort of that floodplain area, make it a good biodiversity and community asset. But also there was a proposal for works around Hillier and Brookfield involving the food forest and people down there. And unfortunately, I just found out today that's fallen over because their proponent sort of pulled out at the last minute. So it was a bit crazy. Anyway, the one for Reed Reserve has gone in, so we'll have to wait and see on all that, see how it goes. But thank you to the council staff who were involved in assisting with that. And also with the one in Dead Man's Pass, which our gear organisation's supportive of and provided some input into that. The other thing I just wanted to talk about was relating to this, Steep Creeks, but also development. I mean, it's interesting. The Reed Reserve was created about 25 years ago when that housing development happened in Reed. And part of the deal at the time was the developer was supposed to restore that floodplain. What they did was they did the stormwater works on some basic stormwater works on the floodplain, and then somehow wangled their way out of the process. I'm not sure quite how that happens, but it's the usual story, I think, that you get a developer, then they sell up, and if you don't have an agreement that sticks on the land, then the developer ends up walking away. And that's not good for the town generally. So, you know, that area could have been much better developed many years ago. It's still there now, waiting for an answer. And that brings me to the Steep Creek matter, which I see is on the agenda. It has been for about 9 years, first item. This has got quite an interesting history as well. It's a lot of it's related to Gawler East, or the development with Delphin, Lend-Lease, everybody else who's been up there, because there's 40 or 50 hectares of land up there that potentially will end up in council sort of management at some stage. And I mean, again, typically what happens with these processes is instead of the open space land that's proposed to be handed over to council being developed as part of the, overall urban development, at the start of the process, it just keeps getting pushed off till the end, and then half the time really never happens or only happens in a half-baked way. Whereas, if a developer puts the money in up front, they get the benefit of that because they create this sort of, open space and community asset that attracts people and adds to the value of their land. So I've always been amazed at why people don't, you spend $1 million up front on, improving your environment and open space, you get the money back by get an extra $500 per block or whatever it works out at, and you're home. So anyway, but at one stage in about 2016, the council had a process in place to amend the development plan to cover the issues around these steep creek lines and restoration of the biodiversity in them, and that fell over because there was lobbying and it got delayed, and then the changes in the development plan happened. So carefully thought through so that in the whole process, the current land, they do it themselves or whether they do it in consultation or working partnership with council is sort of up for grabs. But so it's pretty much a cost-free exercise for a developer if you get it right. So
just 30 seconds, Mr. Shackley.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think I'll leave it there. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you. Do you have any questions? Yeah, Councillor Kosh.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions for Mr. Shackley. Out at Reed, what would be the extent of the works out at Reed? Because over there, I realised that it's been going on for a number of years. I've been over there a few times to look at it.
Yeah.
A lot of galanium, for example. There is some patches of native grasses. Is that what you're looking at? Are you restoring native grasses?
Yeah, about 9 or so hectares of restoration of that open space into essentially a grassy system that you can slash and look after mostly in that way. But some other changes, not that dissimilar to some of the work the council's done in recent years over there, planting around some of the big red gums to improve their habitat, plus keep people away from standing around under big red gums, and some bank stabilisation as well. Yep.
You talked about the areas at Springwood. Have you seen in our agenda the proposed hazard bushfire overlay?
Yes.
And that includes a fair bit of the Springwood area. Is that the area you're talking about, the steep creeks, for example?
Well, the previous high bushfire risk in that area had the South Parra corridor and the what I call Spring Gully or Spring Creek area as high fire risk. It's now been extended beyond that or proposed to be. So yeah, that's interesting. I mean, it is a problem. I mean, when Gawler East rezoning was happening in 2007 to 10, there was a lot of discussion about bushfire risk at the time, and CFS hadn't done their planning all that well, I suspect, and this seems like catch-up, maybe even serious catch-up. Yep.
Thanks, Mr. Shackley. Members, do we have any other questions for Mr. Shackley? No, thank you very much. Is there any other community members that would like to speak in public open forum? I don't think so. Thank you. We will move on to item 4, declarations of interests. We'll start with Councillor Hennessy.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'll be declaring a general conflict of interest in item 8.2. When we get to that, I can give the details.
No worries. Councillor Solomon.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be declaring a general conflict of interest for item 7.5, and we'll detail that when we get to the item.
No worries. Councillor Lorna.
Thank you. I'll be declaring the general interest in 7.6, electricity, and I will declare that when we get there. Thanks.
No worries. Is there any other declarations of interest, members? No, thank you. We'll move to confirmation of minutes. We have 2 minutes. We need to confirm 2 meetings. We'll start with the ordinary Infrastructure and Environmental Services Committee meeting held on the 10th of October 2023. Could I have a mover, Councillor Hughes? Any discussion on that, Councillor Hughes? No. Seconded by Deputy Mayor Davies. Is there any discussion around those minutes, members? No. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Then the special IES meeting held on the 21st of November 2023. Councillor Hennessy, you happy to move that way? A seconder, Councillor Hughes. Is there any discussion regarding that meeting? Nope. I'll put that motion to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. We will move on to item 6, business arising from the minutes. I'll take this as read. Is there any questions from any of the items or updates? Members. Councillor Hughes.
Seeing Mr Shackley ask the question about the steep creek lines, the first one, it has been sitting there for a number of years, from 2014. I was wondering how that update was going, whether it's a question on notice or how.
I'll defer to Wendy. Take that on notice? Yeah, no worries. We'll take that on notice, Councillor Hughes. Is there any other questions? Councillor Shanks.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I'm on page 6 of 72. Just in regards to the Concordia structural planning, I guess I'm just trying to check if we could get a little bit of an update through you, Chair, for our member that we have on the panel of where that's sitting, when the next meetings are, how the conversations are going to date.
Might defer to Andrew for that.
Thank you, through the Chair. There hasn't been any meetings this side of Christmas, but my understanding is they're scheduling meetings over the next 4 weeks, so there'll be something coming up shortly. I can't remember exactly what date it is, but I can let you know and communicate on Thursday or by other means.
Thank you. Councillor Hennessy.
Yeah, well, I think having this business arising is a good idea. The last 4 items, for example, have no status updates, so I'm wondering why there is no information on them. And like Councillor Hughes, I'm also noticing that a couple of them with local design review schemes are starting to endlessly move on and on and on. There's about 2 or 3 that are all linked together. So I guess I'm looking for some information, please, on the status update of the last 4 and the matter taken on notice about the local design.
Thanks, Councillor.
Thank you.
I might just go to Andrew for an answer there.
Sure. So just to be clear, Councillor Hennessy, you're referring to the first item being on page 10 of 72, is that right? With respect to the Town Centre design framework, we're at the process of preparing budget bids, which is an interesting process, as you know, and there'll be a workshop shortly with councillors on some initial thoughts on that. But it's a budget bid effectively for 24-25, consistent with the scoping that was discussed. It was late November, I think it was November last year from my recollection when we had a workshop. So that's the first item. In regards to the second item, which was historic walls update, effectively there's a need, and I think there's a resolution to the effect that we would do a community workshop. We're just trying to find a date that's suitable sometime between March and April, and I know that David Bilitovich was talking with, I think, the Mayor and with Henry about that, so I can confirm when that is. I just don't know off the top of my head what that date was, but it's coming up. Obviously it's more logistics because it's a community meeting as opposed to simply a council workshop. In regards to southern rural areas, as we briefed, I think it was the last meeting, that matter's on hold pending further discussions with the Commission and Renewal SA. We had a email update from Renewal, I think it was yesterday, indicating the meeting with us on, I think, Chris, was it the 1st of March? Yeah, 1st of March. So that is moving forward. My apologies, I didn't actually update that in the notes. I should have, but that is moving forward. And ideally, of course, we want to have Renewal and the Commission in the room at the same time. So that whilst the request came from Renewal, we're coordinating that with the Commission as well. And finally, the Hillier Code Amendment was gazetted, and that was finalised probably in the last 2 weeks. Yep.
Thank you, Andrew. And you can get back to us regarding the community workshop. Yeah, we'll take that on notice. Fantastic. Thank you. Councillor Shanks.
Sorry, just one more through you, Chair. The Pioneer Park update there says preparation for design and construct procurement process have commenced. I do note in the motion we were hoping to get underway in construction late this financial year. So I just thought I'd just check in on that. Don't mean to put anyone on the spot. If it needs to be taken on notice, so be it.
No, I'll defer to Wendy for an update, or if you'd like to take that on notice.
Yep, through you, the Chair, we're still aiming for construction to start by late this financial year. The procurement documentation's nearly done. So we were hoping to have it out to market at the end of this month. We have had a little bit of staffing, a lack of redundancy because we've just had a couple of babies arrive early. Is actually what's happened. So yes, we've got a few staff less staff under a bit of pressure. So, but we're still fighting to get it done.
Thanks for that update, Wendy. Members, is there any other questions regarding the business arising from the minutes? There be none? No, we'll move on to item 7, the decision reports. We'll start off with 7.1, the appointment of the deputy chairperson. Just a slight grammatical thing. We've just updated the officer's recommendation to be appointment of a deputy presiding member. It's slightly different terminology that we updated in the term of references at the end of last year. So it'll be the appointment of the deputy presiding member for the IES committee. We need some nominations. Would anyone like to put their hand up and be nominated? Councillor Shanks, you nominating yourself? Yep, fantastic. Is there any other member? No worries. We'll hold on 2 seconds, Councillor Samble. Is there any other members that would like to put their hand up to be deputy presiding member? No? Final call? Easy. Okay, we'll put Councillor Shanks' name in there. Councillor Samble, do you want to move the motion that way? Yeah, Councillor Samble to move that Councillor Shanks be appointed the deputy presiding member. Can I have a seconder? Deputy Mayor Davies. Is there any discussion? No. I'll put that motion then. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Congratulations, Councillor Shanks. We'll move on to item 7.2. Gawler 2046 Growth Management and Infrastructure Framework and Gawler Integrated Transport Strategy. We've got a couple of presentations tonight, members, so I think we'll start with Chris and Richard from the town of Gawler, and then we'll hear from representatives from Jensen Plus and SMEC, but we'll start with Chris and Richard, and I believe there's a PowerPoint presentation. Thank you, gentlemen. You have the floor.
Well, thank you. Yeah, look, I guess we're going to provide, a collaborative presentation around the Gawler Growth Framework, which is the piece of work that Chris and I are both working with Jensen Plus and SMEC on over the next 6 to 8 months. So I suppose just to provide, a bit of an overview, we're doing, a number of presentations to the elected members. The first one tonight, providing a bit of an introduction to the project team with Jensen and SMEC here. The second in around April, which is a update on the work that we're going to be undertaking. So in particular, community engagement is about to commence fairly soon. And on top of that as well, we're doing a lot of work with stakeholders. And then the third one, estimated around June, which is where we should be in a position where we'd actually have a draft transport and planning strategy in place that we can exhibit and present to the community. There we go. So we have done a little bit of rebranding around the names, and that's a little bit different from the council report. So we're running with what's called the Gawler Growth Framework as being the body of work that encompasses the Gawler Planning Framework, which is the G2046, which is the planning and land use vision for Gawler, and the Gawler Integrated Transport Strategy, which is the transport vision for Gawler. The planning framework is being led by Jensen Plus in Michael McEwen and Patrick, and the Gawler Integrated Transport Strategy is being led by James and Charles, and they'll both undertake a presentation. The work they've done to now has been really good, and we really look forward to working with them as a team. They have really strong capabilities, and I think we'll deliver a really good outcome with their help and services.
So, as Richard said, we'll be working intensely with the consultant team over the next 6 months, and I suppose the unique thing is that we are integrating transport and planning together, and often those two sorts of studies are done by different departments. We're being very integrated in what we do. And we think to deliver a successful Gawler growth framework, 2046, so we're aiming what will Gawler really be like in 2046. We need very strong community engagement as the community shapes our future. We need very strong collaboration with key agencies and business groups, and we've got excellent databases. And I think our work that we did over GARP has made state agencies sit up a bit and pay attention, and they want to get a lot done in Gawler. So I think we'll get that collaboration. And I suppose the other thing that you need is a good, experienced technical staff in strategic planning, land use and transport planning, which we've got through Jensen Plus, Michael McKeon, Patrick and Reb, and through the Integrated Transport Study, GITS 2046, we've got James Parrott and Charles Newland. So we'll invite them to come up and do a presentation of what they've found to date.
Yeah, that's the one. Beautiful. Thank you very much for having us here today. I'm really happy to be here to be talking to you about the Gawler Integrated Transport Strategy. I think it's going to be a very exciting project, and there's a lot of opportunity for really good outcomes. So just a little bit about who we are, just to give you a bit of an idea and a bit of comfort that you're in safe hands. So we have a team that's both local and interstate. So we bring in our technical expertise from interstate, and we have a proven track record of doing that, coupled with our locals. So myself and Charles, obviously, we live, eat, drink and work here. And we obviously have a vested interest in making sure that we get good outcomes for Metropolitan Adelaide and South Australia in general. In terms of our background, we've actually been working in and around Gawler for quite a long time, the last 15 years. The team and SMEC itself have been, which includes strategic modelling of various options, so looking at the growth of Concordia and Hewitt and Gawler East, and looking at all the various link road options, using the strategic model back then called MASTEM, through to undertaking independent reviews on the updated modelling that the department did around the Gawler East Link Road, through to supporting the department in developing up the concept design for the Gawler East Link Road and providing traffic services in particular and road design services to help get that out to market and obviously get successfully constructed. On top of that, we also are in a very unique position where we, at the moment, maintain the state strategic model, so the State Adelaide strategic model for the department. So that involves from Clare all the way down to the Fleurieu Peninsula. It's a very big model, and it entails all the road networks, public transport, land use. So we have a very good appreciation of what's happening in Adelaide, and obviously Gawler is one of those places that we are interested in because it's a large growth area. So a piece of work we did recently was the Murray Bridge Community Infrastructure Model. Why is that relevant? What Gawler is going through is what the work we were doing with Murray Bridge. And we worked with them, and in fact we saw a lot of symmetries with what Gawler was about to go through, and we were planning to talk to Gawler, and obviously the Integrated Transport Strategy came out, and we put in a bid, and we obviously drew on our experience. And if you look through what's up on the screen in terms of the objectives, it's developing forecast growth, land use and transport, including an ultimate scenario, which was a really interesting task to look at what would Murray Bridge look like in an ultimate scenario. What that enabled us to do was to actually undertake a social infrastructure assessment, which ERPS did, and we also did the transport assessment. So we could come up with a list of transport interventions, which then provides council with information around what needs to be built in terms of, and what council's role is with a provider versus an advocate, and also then in terms of prioritising what interventions need to occur in the short term and the long term. So very similar in terms of what we're trying to achieve here, which is to understand the growth and to understand what needs to occur in the short term and also in the longer term. So what are the objectives for GITS 2046? I think the key thing here is that what we're trying to do is we want to provide guidance around a pathway to developing the Gawler area so that you can manage the risks. And then there are risks, and we can't deny that there aren't. There's, very large planned growth, and it can be done very well or very poorly. So it's very important that we set up the right sort of framework and that we have the right strategy that's in place to help us in terms of making decisions, not just now, but in the future. The focus will be split up into what I'm calling the shorter term, which is sort of the next 5 to 10 years, versus the medium longer term, which is going out to 2046 and potentially beyond. And that's important because there are issues that are facing Gawler now, and there are issues that Gawler will face as the growth occurs. And it's important to consider them contextually from the perspective of what is relevant now and what actually might be relevant in the future again. So what do we want to do? We want to listen. I think that's the most important thing. We want to understand what the concerns are. We want to talk to stakeholders. We want to talk to the local residents. We want to hear from yourselves. We want to hear from council staff. We want to hear from everyone, because the important thing is that we want to listen and learn. The best way to get an outcome that is successful is that we listen, we learn, and we understand so that we can work out the right strategies based on what people are feeling and what people are seeing. And we also need to ensure that it's realistic. We can always talk about, real grandiose. We could say, let's build a tunnel. That's a wonderful idea, and it probably would solve your traffic problems tomorrow. But it's a bit expensive and probably won't go ahead. They're quite expensive tunnels. So we need to make sure that we come up with realistic outcomes and acknowledge the fact that some issues, we may not be able to fix them, but we might be able to make sure that they don't get any worse. And really just to refocus on, this is just phase one of this. We're developing up a strategy, but the strategy is about the next steps, because there are a lot of steps that will go on beyond this development of the strategy. So baseline, what are we going to do? We're going to collect a whole lot of data. We want to understand. And collecting data means, all of those things: road, freight, public transport, active travel, population, employment, education. We love data. We want it all. We want to focus, as I say, on strong engagement. We want to make sure that we look at things like the road hierarchy to support planning in the shorter term and also in the longer term. Look at public transport opportunities. We understand there's been some trials done, and it's important to look at how we can help improve people's ability to have choice, and also how can we optimise walking and cycling opportunities. And really, the main thing is that we collaborate. And I really do stress that the success we've had in recent projects has all been geared around collaboration, and that's really a priority for us. And that's why I say we want to listen, we want to learn, and we want to work with people, and we want to work with council to make sure that we come up with the best possible outcome. So in terms of future planning, there's a few stats on here which are interesting. So we obviously know that Gawler's forecast for quite a significant amount of growth. And I thought it'd just be useful just to sort of give you some context around what people do in Gawler versus elsewhere in the network. So in Gawler, 94% of people who work in Gawler, so they don't necessarily reside in Gawler, but they work in Gawler, they travel by car. Less than 1.5% of people who work in Gawler actually get to work via public transport. Around 4% of people who live in Gawler use public transport to get to work. So it's a bit of an understanding that depending on where you're going to, you can have an impact. And Gawler's car ownership is an average about 1.77 cars per household. So, it's not quite 2 cars per household. What's interesting is that when you look at the state average and the metro average, it's not that much lower. It's 1.73. So the thought that Gawler has a lot more cars than, say, the rest of the network is not necessarily true. But what you can see with the stats below is that 32% of people who work in the CBD use public transport. And that makes sense because the public transport system is set up to support travel to the city. It's not so easy if, say, I live in Port Adelaide and I work in Gawler to use public transport. So we need to be realistic about what we can actually achieve in terms of switching people to different modes. We have to acknowledge the fact that, Gawler has a very car-centric movement, but that's not unsurprising given the location and the remoteness. And to give you some context, I looked at Mount Barker, which I review as sort of a similar sort of arrangement where you're, a fair way out of the city on the outskirts, and they've only got a 2.5% mode share. So even for a place like that, which has more public transport services, they still don't have a much larger public transport mode share. And if you go to Playford, which is probably a bit better, it's only at 3.5%. So It's just to give you some context in terms of when people go to work, because this is the easiest information we collect through census, you can see that the majority of people don't actually catch public transport, they drive. So when you talk about mode shifts, you have to be realistic in terms of what you're trying to do, but it doesn't mean we can't be aspirational in what we want to try and target. And from that context, the state model tells us that around 4.5% of all trips are public transport in the metro area. So that gives you a bit of a context around people's behaviour locally. And in terms of GARP, I mean, we know that they've forecast, obviously, Concordia's there, but also they're saying there's potential further development, which we're going to be investigating, both from an employment and from a population or residential perspective. And that's where it comes down to the point that if we're going to actually be successful, we have to integrate the transport and land use. What usually happens is you put the land use down, and then that creates the issues, and then you try and solve it with transport. Well, that's just a reactive approach. We want to be proactive, where we actually integrate the land use and the transport solutions together to get the optimal outcome. And now I'll pass over to Michael.
Thanks, James. Yeah, Michael McKeown here from Jensen Plus. I'm an urban planner, urban designer, and we are trying to integrate our introductory presentations to you, and we've got some integrated questions for you coming up. What I'll take you through is just a little bit more about the project and the process, including some of the community and stakeholder engagement that we're intending to do, which is actually integrated for both of the studies together. So from a community point of view, there's really just one engagement exercise, which is really important. And we've got some early observations and also then just some prompt questions for you coming up. So Jensen Plus, so yeah, we do a whole series of strategic and master planning exercises from the very big scale across regions and sub-regions. We did a big plan in the Snowy Mountains of New South Wales during COVID, which was really interesting, around Jindabyne and some of those natural areas. We're working in Alice Springs at the moment on their town centre and some great projects there. We also helped with some consultation on the Greater Adelaide Regional Plan discussion paper. We were not involved in writing that paper, but we've got a bit of knowledge of the background behind it. We do a lot of work in regional towns and cities around Australia. We do enjoy working with regional communities and smaller places. So the aims and objectives of the G2046, so the planning exercise, well, it is very much about understanding the issues, constraints and opportunities around land in the town of Gawler. That's both the established areas and undeveloped areas. Thinking about the possible scenarios for the future growth and development of the town, what pace of change, what locations, and what's the kind of staging that should form a well-planned and well-supported by infrastructure town plan. We definitely want to engage strongly with stakeholders and community throughout the process, and ultimately we want to bring together a preferred framework that you can then use as your policy to direct further initiatives. My eyesight is struggling a bit with your grand hall here, but the methodology, we've got some key steps there which you can see. So we're certainly starting with the background investigations. We're going to begin our early engagement very soon, which in fact I guess includes this meeting. You are the first group that we're essentially talking to. We'll talk a bit more about the engagement exercises in a moment. We do want to drive a bit of a vision through this process. So there's a lot of talk about parcels of land. There's a lot of talk about numbers and percentages. But you know, what is the vision for the town of Gawler in 2046? How are you going to describe it to your family and to your neighbours? We want to think about that in this exercise as well. It's not just a technical plan. It's not just a technical exercise about where the roundabout should go and where we should rezone land. It's about what the lifestyle is and what the employment is and what the look and feel of the place is as well. We will be doing scenarios. We will be testing them before we come forward with a preferred plan. Map that out a little bit over the 8 or 9 months of the process. So we started really late December, really just the start of January there. We've got our data collection and analysis underway. You can see that we'll be doing some scenario planning through the middle of the year, and there will be a draft and a final document. Now, importantly, if we overlay some of the key community engagement steps, we're actually planning to do some early community and stakeholder engagement very soon. That will include a community survey, so an online survey, and also some drop-in sessions where we'll be inviting community members and also community groups to talk to us about areas of interest, both for land and development, but also transport. So what are the transport hotspots that people experience every day? What are they concerned about? Where are the opportunities that they have? So that will be starting really just at the end of this month into early March, and there'll be at least a couple of drop-in sessions probably held at the Institute here downstairs, and we're looking for a really strong collection of information through that process. We'll also, on the bottom of the screen, we'll be doing some co-design workshops. We do like to do a collaborative process to come up with options. So we'll be bringing some key representatives into the room, perhaps this room or one very similar to it, to do some options development and testing through the middle of the year so that we can really develop together what the potential might be. And then after we've got a draft plan in about June, July, we'll be doing another formal period of public consultation where submissions and representations are invited, but also there'll be some community forums where we can explain what's in the plan or plans to community and stakeholders. A little bit more detail on the stakeholder and community engagement plan, which we've just been working on over the last couple of weeks. We do use the IAP2 spectrum of public participation, which is a really good way of trying to work out how to engage with different groups. So there's some groups, such as yourselves, and some of the key state agencies, like Department of Infrastructure and Transport and Department of Trade Investment, the Planning Department. We really want to involve them quite closely in the discussions. There's many other groups we want to consult. We want to ask them questions. We want to give them a chance to respond to our work. And then there's other stakeholders who might be quite interested in what we're doing, but they might be essentially leaving us to it until there is a plan to respond to. That might include the State Planning Commission, although of course their officers, their staff are pretty heavily involved through the formation of the plan. So we have thought that through in quite a lot of detail over the last few weeks. Some early observations. So you know the town of Gawler and its environs better perhaps than I do and some of the team, but your staff hosted us on a tour of the town in January, and just spinning through quickly. I guess that going to some locations where things are happening now or things have been talked about or things might happen in the future is a really good way just to understand the current context. So certainly we understand the town centre, and it's got a lot of good planning that's been done in the town centre. It's also got constraints and amazing character, which is important. And there's some transport pressure and the connectivity through the town centre as well. Concordia, of course, has been mentioned, and the state government are moving forward with an exercise to zone a large future development area at Concordia, so that's very significant, as you well know. Gawler East and Springwood, and learning from the planning over 10 plus years that's happened, and we've been reflecting a little bit on maybe the anticipated dwelling outcomes and yields of that land compared to perhaps at the rezoning stage when there was a larger number that was being talked about. So how do you think ahead to make sure that we're not over-promising, for example, for certain land, and making sure we get the right development outcomes for future growth areas? And you might have some reflections and observations on that yourselves. Then we move through, of course, the Gawler East Link Road and down south towards Evanston Park and Evanston Gardens, where there is rural land, there is potential future development land, there's also potential future open space and recreation areas. There's been some good discussions about the role of the railway and the stations in that locality, and how they could provide the basis for a really good quality, more sustainable development with walk-up access to electric rail into Gawler and to Adelaide, of course. I think that's a really important planning principle that we need to think about for those southern locations, and also the green belt and the separation of towns, and making sure that Gawler is a well-defined town that has separation from neighbouring communities as well. And we've moved through Hillier, where perhaps there's less change as far as urban development goes. There's more of a horticultural and rural future there, and then back through towards the town centre and some of your well-loved community spaces, which are going to get more and more loved by existing and future residents, I imagine. And so making sure that the plan for the future considers existing areas as well, including employment areas and opportunity for retail and commercial activities to happen alongside housing. The last bit of information here, just acknowledging that there's previous work, there's strategic plans, there's policies, there's existing studies that we will use to inform this work. We know, of course, there was a discussion paper on the Greater Adelaide Regional Plan, only a discussion paper, you might say, but also it's flagging some potential policies with a very high growth assumption, which perhaps in some of your own work in the last couple of years, and those blue-coloured studies by a linear group around employment, land, retail and commercial and population are really suggesting, well, actually, maybe that high assumption of growth is maybe not the reality. And in fact, some of the work done by your staff shows the difference between projections and actual levels of population or dwelling change. And so we're very conscious of that and making sure that we know what is maybe, as James said, a realistic outcome and not necessarily just a aspirational outcome. There's also been some more specific planning, the Southern Rural Areas paper, which I think you'll know all about because you've recently considered that paper, which has got some pretty up-to-date local and district level planning, which we can incorporate into this broader study. And there's also been some other studies done, including a couple by my colleagues around the rail corridor and potential uplift benefits, and also some very recent work we've just been doing with Andrew to review the Gawler East Development Area community infrastructure planning and the potential implications on the infrastructure charges and delivery of infrastructure, social and community infrastructure through that Gawler East area, which of course gives us good insights into what other areas might be able to deliver as far as open space and community infrastructure goes. So that's kind of all we know so far, because we're early stages and we're just beginning our investigations. And that's really the end of our introductory talk, if you like. When we go out to the community soon, we'll be asking them questions like this, and I'd like to ask you the same questions, because in some ways we like to start by understanding, well, what do you love most about this place, this town, this community? Because the things you value most are the things that we want to make sure that we protect in future planning, but also thinking about that 20-plus year vision. What will Gawler be like in 20 years' time? It's unlikely to be the same as today, and I'm sure 20 years ago things were a bit different or very different. Interested in your own individual ideas about future vision. And then question 3 there, getting a bit more specific. Are there any development locations or transport or infrastructure needs or issues that you know about and you just want to bring to our attention? Because we'll be asking these questions to the community and community groups very soon. So I'd love to hear from you, perhaps individually. Some of you may have some ideas that we can record and take into this process. So thanks very much for listening. Look forward to your comments.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, James, as well. I think we'll have a few questions and comments for both you and James. So, James, maybe if you want to pop up next to Michael, I'll go around the room. Mayor Redmond, did you have comments? Yeah, far away.
What do I love about living in Gawler? I love the heritage. I love the strong community flavour, and everyone helps each other. That can't be lost. That cannot be lost. This redevelopment here, we used to call it Gawler Connect. And we used that term because we had new people coming in and established people already in the town, and we wanted to connect them together. So this original project was called Gawler Connect. And that was 2 words brought together to bring people together and to develop a community. So our strong community values are highly valued in this town. You know, when you walk down the street or you go to the supermarket, you'll see lots of people that you know. So that cannot be lost. And I know that we are growing, and you had something like 50,000 people up there. I think there's going to be 150,000 people coming into Gawler over the long term. So the community values are really important. Heritage is really important. I love our main street. I think it's a fabulous main street. It needs to change, I think. However, it is a highly regarded element of Gawler. Our rural areas, Hillier, particularly in Hillier, there's some fabulous businesses down there that are doing agriculture. We've got flooding. We've got lots of issues. However, the community values and the heritage and that connectedness we cannot lose. If we lose that, I think that it would be to our detriment. So social planning and social impact is going to be really, really important for your work. From a transport point of view, we need the eastern bypass that goes from the Barossa Valley Highway to the Sturt Highway through Concordia, over the North Parra River, and a major intersection at the Sturt Highway. Now, I know that that's a lot of money, and that will help manage our traffic. It'll manage the trucks that come through the main North Road and turn up Lindock Road, and they stop because there's now a red light there, and you have to stop, and they have to actually stop and start and get up that hill, and that's not easy for those trucks. So they will be removed, and they will go along that new Eastern Highway and take their sheep or their pigs to the Murray Bridge abattoirs. That's where they're going. So I think that taking those trucks out of Gawler would be a really good thing. And also taking the unnecessary traffic that comes through the main street also is coming down through the southern Barossa. They all come down the Lindock Road. They all go down the Gawler East Link Road or Schomburg Drive, and yeah, I see them. I walk that road twice a week, and yeah, it's getting busier. It's getting busier. So I think that needs to be dealt with. We also need walking and cycling. Walking and cycling. We need more footpaths. We need linkages, particularly down in the southern urban areas. There's no linkages to the Tamblin railway station. There's no linkages to the Cuddler railway station, and that needs to improve. That really, really needs to improve, and there is an opportunity to do walking and cycling trails along the river corridors or wherever it could be to enable people to enjoy living in this place of Gawler. And I think that I'll stop talking now and give somebody else a go.
Thanks, Mayor. We'll go around the table for any other comments and questions for Michael and James. Who have we got? Councillor Hughes?
Yeah, I'm glad that cycling and walking was mentioned. I was worried that it was just going to be buses and cars. But it is really important that Gawler is a walkable and cyclable safe place. We have a really, really low percentage of our school children walking and cycling to school. And we are trying to work on making that a lot safer. So at school hours, Gawler becomes gridlocked basically because they're all getting dropped off and picked up, and it's probably our worst traffic is that school time in Gawler, and out of those hours, our road network works fairly well. Even our peak hour traffic isn't really that bad by 5:30 or from 5 to 5:45 it might be busy, but after that it's really good. I have in the past sort of complained to different state MPs about public transport and told that we just as a state don't complain enough about our public and demand more from our public transport, and we should be doing that. So probably after suggestions on the cycling and walking and the public transport, what I do like about Gawler is a lot what the Mayor was saying. It is one of those places where you'll run into 3 or 4 people, and because we've got those places available and wide footpaths down the main street and cafes and places like that and shopping. But yeah, if we do have a flood or one of our local road networks is closed off, we have traffic banked up very quickly throughout Gawler. It's those forward crossings really are impacted heavily. We do need that Tiver Road link across. At the moment, it runs to Potts Road, but that Tiver Road lights massive intersection, but it doesn't really do a lot. We really need that eastern link, either through the Barossa Highway or especially with the development of Concordia. And in some ways I think that might be cheaper than Sturt Highway. I think we need the Sturt Highway, but I think as cost-wise and doability, Tiver through Eastern may actually be cheaper. But yeah, that's probably my main concerns is the walking, cycling, and just how we promote that and make it more easier. It took me a very long time to get my wife and family members just to park in one spot in Gawler and realise they could walk really quite easily and not have to shift the car 3 or 4 times. And now they realise that, yeah, they can do that. I think there's that mentality with Gawler that you do have to keep, and if you can't park out the front of a shop or something like that, you're in trouble. But that, I think, is slowly going. But I think we need to highlight sometimes that it is easy just to park in one spot and actually get all your shopping and move around the town within a couple of hours. Most of our parking's 3 or 4 hours, and I drive through the main street quite a lot, and majority of the day I see a lot of car parks in the main street, for example. But yeah, it is really hard to cycle from one end of Gawler to the other. You can do suburbs, but yeah, it's basically a no-go zone most of the day to try and ride down the main street of Gawler. It's not something most cyclists try and even do. The way the road is actually set up, it's just not too many pinch points, and you do have to take the whole lane, which vehicles don't like. High Street for cyclists is good, but yeah, the main street's not so good. But yeah, I'll leave you at that.
Thanks, Councillor. I'll go to Councillor Kosh.
Yeah, look, thanks, Chair. Look, I've got three items I want to talk about. The first one is the bushfire overlays. I'm sure you've seen the new bushfire overlays. And if you go to page 2 of the Technical Guide for Practitioners, on page 2 it says the Code's policy aim to cite new development away from unacceptable bushfire risk in a high bushfire hazard area and seek suitable design responses to other areas. So when I look at that and I look at the actual map, Concordia, parts of Springwood and the Gawler River are in that high bushfire risk zones or areas. So I just want to get some comments from you about how you deal with that. That's the first issue.
Yeah, I think to some degree some of those policies can be in conflict. So I think we have to look at them strategically and also in the local planning sense. We haven't got to that level of detail yet, and of course the bushfire overlay changes will be subject to a lot of submissions and feedback and review. But we've seen this in other projects, in other locations, where bushfire risk is increasing as a risk on urban development. And sometimes there's no easy answers to that, because some of those interfaces and the risks are really, really quite high. So thanks for raising that as a key planning issue that we've got to review as part of this exercise.
Okay, the next one is just the comment here in our document says logical and sequential growth and implications of this for infrastructure funding will be a core concern. I mean, I've been on council my 4th term. I've seen plenty of scenarios where we approve development but not the infrastructure, and it's a bit of a catch-up. For example, currently we have a whole lot of areas that are designated for growth, and then we just had the state government go out to do some consultation about what road network do we need. Surely that should have happened before you went out and said we're going to rezone all these different areas. I think you're putting the cart before the horse. In some respects, I think the development industry lobbies so well that they get the approvals, etc., without being tied down to the actual infrastructure that's needed. That's a concern. Now, the last one is about community consultation. You talk about, your company wants to listen, learn and understand and to be realistic. That's what you said. Now, when I think about community consultation about the Southern Rural Zone, every single community plan that I've been involved with over the last, this is my 4th term, the main issue is the physical separation from Greater Adelaide. It is the top issue that the people in Gawler say is their top issue. Number one. The next one is the parks. I am concerned that if you who you talk to about the Southern Rural Zone. For example, in my opinion, there are probably 5 different classes of people. There are people that wish to retire and sell up, so they're going to have a certain view of the world. You have people who invest in there as speculators. They're going to have a different view of the world. People who are really quite happy with the zoning as it is. The horticultural and agriculture businesses that are there already and be impacted by development, and then also future generations, future horticultural and agricultural operators. So if you just go down to the Southern Rural Zone and talk to people who are good lobbyists, you'll get one view. But if you actually talk to the Gawler community, the wider Gawler community, which comes through the community plan, which I hear every single time, you'll probably have a different view of the world than if you just talk to the speculators and the people that want to retire. So because you do say you want to listen, learn and understand, you want to be realistic, but I think you need to make sure you actually listen to the broad spectrum of the community, because it's the whole of Gawler. So if you ask the Gawler community where they want to be in 2046, I think the last thing they would want to say is they want to be physically part of the Greater Adelaide. That would, I mean, if you ask them, I don't think, apart from the speculators and people that want to retire, they're the ones who would say, yes, let's be part of Greater Adelaide, but the majority of people will not say that. So I think you need to really be careful, and your consultation should be very, very broad, especially on the Southern Rural Zone. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Koch, for the comments. I'll go to Deputy Mayor Davies.
All right. Public transport. I'm on the Youth Advisory Committee and also the Ageing Well Committee. It's sort of the 2 opposite ends of the spectrum there. And they both brought up transport, and specifically public transport, as priorities. I think those are groups that can be, you had your statistics of people going to work, but obviously retirees are going to be a large part of the infrastructure that we need to have. And a lot of those people, I know plenty of people who, for example, won't drive at night because of their eyesight and various things. So, that structurally needs to be put in. And as Councillor Hughes mentioned, a low percentage of kids walking to school and that sort of thing. And the kids that are walking to school, some of them are some issues along the Tamberlin train line sort of area, in particular with just lack of paths. But yeah, I had a bit of an enlightening experience over the Christmas break. I went to a holiday in Texas, and a lot of people, I feel like a lot of people go to Europe and come back saying, oh, we should do it like Europe, it's, you know. And so I sort of had the opposite experience of what happens if I was in a sort of semi-rural town that was entirely car-centric, and there was a grocery store 5 minutes walk away, but you couldn't walk because there were no footpaths to it. And there was a downtown 10 minutes walk away, but you couldn't walk to it because the entire town was split in half by a freeway, and the only way to get through it was sort of going under this bridge that didn't have proper infrastructure for it. And that really sort of, I guess, yeah, gave me a big point of comparison to, you know, what happens if it is just all under the assumption that everyone's going to drive a car. You know, obviously having cars is always going to be the case. And I think the statistic said people in Adelaide have fairly similar rates of ownership of cars. And especially out here, there's always going to be people who need cars to drive to work because they work, a large percentage work in like the Barossa and rural areas, and they're always going to need a car. But, you know, I think it is something that I think as we become more metropolitan, I think one thing that comes with that is necessarily going to be a higher percentage of people using public transport. So I was just wondering if you have a, I guess as a question, do you envision public transport becoming a higher percentage for Gawler? And if so, what's the best way to achieve that?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think it's important. I was just sort of scene setting in terms of understanding what you could potentially achieve. I think if we just focus on car, we're going to get the bad outcome. If we focus on public transport, we'll get a bad outcome. If we focus on walking and cycling, we'll get a bad outcome. Why? Because the only way to actually get a good outcome is to have a truly integrated transport solution. And I use the term transport, and it's very important because transport covers all modes. So the idea is not that we will focus on one particular mode, but that we will look at the various requirements of people's movements to understand where can we have meaningful mode shift, which has benefits. So, you know, why is walking and cycling so important? Because it has health benefits. It's quite clear and obvious that that's a really good outcome for people. And I agree with what the councillor said around, you know, being able to get out and walk around. Now, part of it is if we just sort of plonk in new services, that doesn't mean we're going to get a behavioural shift. So there's more to it than just saying we're just going to put infrastructure in and hope for the best. You also need to make people understand through behaviour change how they can actually have different choices. Because sometimes people have choices and they don't realise they have the choice. So, and that's a soft measure as opposed to a hard measure, which is an infrastructure upgrade. So it's very important that we don't consider any one mode above the other, but that we understand that each will play a role in the sustained growth. And it comes back to how, for instance, will we get better public transport through better integration, which then tees back to land use. So if we have a very sparse, a very poorly laid out road network, we're going to have a situation where people are going to drive because you can't offer services that are meaningful. So what's a good public transport strategy? High frequency and reliability. They're the two things that people look for most. So frequency, so make sure that I don't have to wait too long, and reliability. My trip's not going to be 30 minutes one day and 60 minutes the next. You get those two things and you start to actually get uplifts in public transport. And part of doing that is ensuring that you integrate the public transport into your development in terms of your road networks and your land use as well. And it's about destination centres as well. So Gawler has this lovely thing where it has this beautiful main strip, which is a place people want to come to. They want to come here to actually, you know, not to bypass. Unfortunately, we have a bypass issue as well where people want to drive through. So it's a movement and a place. But that opens up opportunities too in terms of how you plan your development so that you can potentially provide opportunities to have a choice. And really having a choice is the key thing for it. So yes, I would expect an uplift in public transport. If we don't, I feel like we've failed because ultimately that's not a good outcome. But at the same time, what I'm trying to get at is, are we going to get a 30% mode shift? No. But can we get a meaningful mode shift, and can we provide services which benefit the community, especially those who are vulnerable? That's a great outcome too. So there's also that social element as well as just looking at the hard numbers, which I never do. And I just wanted to add one more thing quickly too, in terms of the other thing with this work is that we need, why Murray Bridge was so useful when we did the ultimate scenario is that we had an idea of what the ultimate scenario would be, which then gave us an idea of to plan for what actually needs to be upgraded, and therefore, rather than having developments occur and they're isolated and they actually are part of the broader picture, and we can actually understand what's their impact long term on the interventions needed. So you can, by doing this planning up front, you actually have the opportunity now to plan out what you're going to need and do more work to investigate what that means in terms of costs and who pays for it, so that you've actually got a pathway forward. The problem is if you don't have that strategy, you're reactionary, and yeah, that's where you miss out potentially on getting the right, funding. So, thank you.
Thanks, James. Any more? Councillor Shanks?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. To be honest, putting these questions up in front of some passionate elected members, we could be here all night. I think this is probably a standalone workshop, if I'm being honest. Look, I just wanted to, I guess, touch on some of the points that I think were missed by my colleagues, and I don't disagree with what has been said as an overall. But what I like about the town of Gawler is the opportunity, not only for where and how I choose to do business in the town, but also for my young family growing up and what education opportunities are here. We do have a very good mix of public schools that are very high rated in the space, along with private as well. And from that, the spin-off of communities, sporting infrastructure and the light sporting community, maybe not the infrastructure. We are playing a bit of catch-up in that space, I believe. What the things that are working against us, I believe, as an overall bigger picture is while we focus on, we might have our urban sprawl development and the like, we're predominantly talking about residential rate income, which comes with a high cost outcome to service the rates with low return. So, that break-even point isn't giving us that real commercial outcomes that provides employment zones and the like. And when you compare us to our neighbours, if we look at it regionally, Barossa and Light, for example, their residential rates and their commercial rate income is a much higher mix in commercial which also allows them to, strategically move around money and plan for without having to provide X amount of more services because you've got X amount of more residents on board. The other thing that I'm a little bit, again, I say concerned, but I say it with a grain of salt because each concern has a risk and a risk has an opportunity. The problem I could see us doing is not embracing the growth and really positioning ourselves well within the region because we're not isolated and being ring-rooted around. You could have a development like Concordia on our doorstep, and that could be the Gawler 2.0 that is easier to get to, easier to blend with and the like. And that's what I sort of worry about. You see examples like Mawson Lakes coming online and then the Salisbury Main Street dying off a little bit. So those are the examples that if we don't think about how the two interact with each other, we can, by default, make this ring-rooted town that has a lot of character, a lot of passion that my colleagues have listed off tonight, that actually doesn't grow. We become stagnant, we become handbrake on because we didn't embrace the change, we were against it. So I guess, again, we could go around and around on this particular topic all night, but just a bit of a congratulations on the vision of tying these two plans together, because you're absolutely right. The traffic outcomes relate to the planning outcomes, and the planning outcomes relate to the traffic outcomes. That is not rocket science, but this is the first time we're starting to see the two relate, and we're not being that reactionary council, which, in my opinion, there are some outcomes that have been that way, whether it's been council-led or proponent-led is a whole different conversation to come, but I look forward to the workshop where we can expand a bit further.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Shanks. Councillor Samble.
Thank you, Chair. Michael and James, you mentioned about the point that of the huge percentage of people that are using the public transport to travel to Adelaide and to those areas. With the huge invent of, at the moment, of the development at Rosewoody, Freeling, Kapunda, and that I was talking to the bloke well, he's not in charge of it, but it's at the railway station at North Gawler. It's a very small car park, but now it's a real challenge for them. Some of the people that are coming from out there are coming in so early just to get a car park. And I think I heard you mention about the point that we've got to, if that's going to grow, we need more areas where cars can park and do that. And as Councillor Hughes said, people for some reason or other don't want to walk any further than 50 feet. But there's a huge area of land on Murray Road when you go down through the fall on Murray Road that is for sale at the moment. And the other day, just out of the blue, my wife said to me, she said, council should buy that for car parking. You know, the other thing in referring to the growth out there, they're coming in and going on the public transport, but parking in Gawler. On the Concordia and out in the Williamstown and area out here on our boundary, there was talk that there was going to be any of that. The only other thing is maybe if either of you could mention to us a bit about why it's 50 kilometres an hour on the Link Road, but as Councillor Shanks said, that's probably going on all night, but we've got a real problem because as councillors we get a phone call every day, what is going on? So there's a couple of questions there, I'm not sure whether you can answer.
Yeah, happy to answer those questions. Yes, I'm completely aware of the rail lines and the potential. Going back 10 plus years ago, there was a study where they were looking at Rosewood becoming a 100,000 person satellite city and looking at the rail spur down. The talk about the rail spur, obviously it sits there at the moment, the existing rail corridor out to the east as well. So they will be absolutely considered in our future year planning in terms of what are the opportunities. And one of the things we'll look at is a range of possible public transport outcomes. Just to consider how best to activate the corridors. And I'd just like to say, in terms of park and rides, couldn't agree more. I'm a park and rider. I do it every day. And I do see the value in it because ultimately, again, when it comes back to those core principles, if you can get to the station, then you have that reliability. And one of the problems we face, and this is getting a bit technical, but when we model public transport trips, we penalise heavily transfers between modes because people don't like it. We penalise people waiting for services because people don't like it. We penalise people walking to bus stops because people don't like it. Think about it, my car's easy. I walk out the front door, I walk through a door through my house and I've got my car. Whereas if I'm going to catch a bus or a train, I've got to walk, so I'm exposed to the elements. So all those things get taken into consideration, and that's where things like park and rides actually are beneficial. In terms of the second question around the Gawler East Link Road, it's a very interesting history. Ultimately, it's got a design speed of 60, and generally speaking, when you have a design speed, you post the speed at 10k below, but doesn't mean you can't have a design and posted speed at the same level. That's just a bit of background. Ultimately, it was a decision made by the government, the department, and they decided on a 60 design speed. So hence, they then decided to implement it at 50k. So that's just a little tidbit into sort of why these things occur, and understand your frustrations on the speed limit. It's hard because people feel like they want to travel faster. So I understand.
Thanks, James. Members, do we have any more questions or comments for James and Michael? No. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for presenting tonight. Thanks to Richard and Chris too for presenting earlier. We will move to the officer's recommendation that's in our agenda now on page 16 of 72. I'm going to go to Councillor Hennessy. Councillor Hennessy, I think you potentially have an alternative motion.
Hang on.
You're on.
I am
yes.
on. Sorry,
yes.
I forget the system each time. Thank you. It has been suggested to me though, rather than make an amendment at this point, that I put it up as a motion on notice. so I will foreshadow. My concern comes, and thank you very much to the presentations and the people who have talked to us tonight. I too look forward to a workshop to allow us to further unpack some of this information that you request from us. Tonight has been, I guess, a good start, but there's obviously a lot more to be discussed from an elected member point of view. Thank you to the officer for providing the detailed report. I think this is about the third update we've had. For me, and that will come through with my motion on notice, it is now starting to point to some of the existing reports, and perhaps it's a chance to revisit it. My particular concern is there was a statement saying that we are about to have a comprehensive revisit and update of the Gawler Town Centre Urban Design Framework, which I've been informed we did have a presentation on late last year. Now it becomes even more critical because although that's a 9-year-old document, I think several elected members have talked about the gem that is our main street, and I think it's vital that we have a look at that again and decide how we're going to review and update it. I think there's going to be quite a healthy debate around that matter. So anyway, I will wait till motions on notice, but I'm happy to move the motion.
So Councillor Hennessy's moved the officer's recommendation, and we'll come back to you, Councillor Hennessy, in the motions without notice. I'm looking for a seconder. Deputy Mayor Davies, would you like to speak?
Yeah, look, thanks for the presentation. I think we're definitely getting somewhere with this. I think for me, a lot of the major structural issues are the responsibility of the state government, but we need to be careful not to just say, oh, well, that's the state government's responsibility. We need to be able to say, here are our specific demands, and I think that needs to be part of our strategy, is to have a specific list of things that we want, that when there's a state election, when there's a federal election, whatever, we can say, when are you going to give us this? You know, rather than saying generally, well, it would be great if they put more money into our region. That's my only other comment, but yeah, I think it's a great presentation.
Thank you. Councillor Shanks.
Yeah, look, happy to support the motion, and again, yeah, look forward to the workshop, because realistically we're merely scratching the surface of this one. Elected members may recall in the budget cycle, I put up a budget bid called a strategic document called the Gawler 42. I had a lot of back and forth with Andrew Goodsell at the time, because I struggled to understand town planner, and he struggled to understand sustainable developer. I'm going to give myself the title for the sake of the exercise. I think we're getting closer to the understanding and translating planner speak, which I mean, with all due respect, completely outnumbered here. Because we're starting to unpack where we need to be. We're trying to figure out that vision, that question that as elected members we always get asked and always get mixed reviews from the ratepayers we represent. And that's why I think we do have a hole in our system currently that we're trying to mend in where are we sitting now, where do we want to sit? Because elected members, we know this town was built for horse and cart, for a population of 2,000, with a probably forecast thinking, oh God, imagine if this was going to be 10 times this size, 20,000, that's ridiculous. We now currently sit at 26,000. And we have the growing pains that modern day brings on a heritage-rich town. Now, again, I think that's an opportunity, and I think if we position ourselves right, we can not only say we're open for business, but we're open for sustainable development, because this reactive approach hasn't worked for us in the past, I believe. And, human movement and current planning law and the data gatherers we have in the room tonight that we can benefit from in 2024 to see how 2046 looks, the learnings of what worked for comparable growth areas like Mount Barker, and more importantly, what didn't work, right? We need to look at all these things. early delivery on infrastructure, I heard Councillor Koch touch on. I completely agree with that. Those early delivery infrastructure ticket items are something we really need to be clear on and position ourselves so we're ready to say, not make requests like Deputy Mayor put forward, but work with our state government agencies to say, hey, we've done all this work, so you guys don't have to, and this is what will work for our town, our community, because here's our vision, and this is how we're open for sustainable development moving forward. But again, the work to be done in this space is actually, I'm quite excited about it. Because if we get this right, it's our kids and grandkids that will benefit moving forward. So happy to support this noting report and really appreciate staff consistently doing the update. And I do start seeing some of the language and I feel a little bit listened to regarding the Gawler 42. So thanks guys for that one.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Koch?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Look, I'll support this motion because it's it'll move things forward. I am concerned if we're just talking about residential growth, because we don't get any net financial gain from residential growth because the rates we get goes out in service delivery. We need to be looking at other issues. We haven't got wineries that we can tax the whatever out of to do whatever we feel like. We haven't got a lot of area to put business in. We had an opportunity, we decided to knock it back. Okay, so that's not a very good signal to anybody that you were happy to knock back a large development in our town. That development is probably going to go elsewhere. So we haven't got a bit of that was very reactive. So I'm very interested to see what happened long term, because people are saying one thing but doing another thing. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Koch. Is there any further discussion? Just a few comments from me. I think I just want to thank staff and the external agencies that are here tonight. I think this is a really great approach, working together on what is clearly a joint issue. And again, seeing this proactive approach being taken is really quite exciting, I think. And getting ahead, I guess, of those challenges, which we know will come, but as I think Councillor Shank said, there's challenges also means there are equal opportunities. So I think it's very, very much exciting. Look forward particularly to seeing the community engagement and the workshops taking place later this year, and just want to thank everyone involved. So if there's no further discussion, I'll go to Councillor Hennessy. Are you happy for me to put that? I'm going to put that motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. It's carried unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Okay, we will move to 7.3, which is on page 23. Yes, okay, so the Coventry Road Cuddler Code Amendment. We're going to have a presentation from Grazio from ERPS, who's here. Thank you very much for coming along. If you could just turn your microphone on when you're ready to go, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, councillors. I'll be quick. I think most of you know who we are. So we're a town planning firm established about 21 years ago, have done a few rezoning projects in Gawler. We're acting on behalf of the landowner, Miss Gonis. Essentially why we're here, we've submitted to council, it hasn't been submitted to the minister yet, but we've submitted to council a proposal to rezone land. The proposal is landowner funded, and we're here to seek in principle support from council. We note council's recommendation, or staff's recommendation on the council agenda papers. Our preference is an alternative recommendation, and I'll explain why during the course of the presentation. But our preferred recommendation is that council agrees in actual principle to the rezoning concept in accordance with the 16 investigation points in your agenda papers from 28 to 29. And you can possibly include another, if council chooses to, another point which suggests that we defer investigations to the code amendment until mid this year, and I'll explain the reasons why. So what we're proposing is to rezone the site, and I'll come to a plan of the site, from rural to master plan neighbourhood zone. The master plan neighbourhood zone is a fairly flexible zone, so it gives the opportunity for the state and council to determine what should go on that site. It's not necessarily a low density residential area. It can incorporate low to medium density. So for example, the desired objective of the master plan zone, this comes from the state policies, states a new or expanding community with a diverse range of housing that supports a range of needs and lifestyles located within easy reach of a diversity of services, facilities and open space. It gives planning authorities and the owner flexibility. It also talks about, for example, building heights of up to 3 levels. So this isn't necessarily a low density development proposal. It can be if if the state and the planning authority choose to, but there is built-in flexibility there, and I'll unpack that later on. This site will be a continuation with potentially slightly different densities to Orleano Waters to the north, which is the same landowner. We have been chatting, pardon me, we have been chatting to United Communities and have a letter of support from them. So the expectation is that we would build in affordable housing in that process. In our opinion, we've also aligned the proposals to the Greater Adelaide Regional Plan, that's a discussion paper, and to the draft Southern Areas discussion paper. The owner has been waiting to lodge this proposal to initiate for about 12 to 18 months. So we've been waiting for a number of documents to be actually released before presenting this proposal. The land, as you know, is just south of Orleano Waters. It's next to the Renew SA land holding, some 31 hectares. It could probably accommodate, ballpark figure, around 300 homes. Land to the, now this is Value General land use data. This site shows the Northern Land Division applications, and the light green is rural living activities based on Value General data. Yeah, it's located about at the closest point, it's 1k to the train station. At the farthest point, it's 1.8 k's to the train station. According to Google Maps, that's 15 to 30 minutes walking. We propose a range of typical investigations. So if the Minister was to grant approval for the first stage, we propose a range of investigations relating to rural interface, stormwater flooding, land supply, social infrastructure. We are fully supportive of the 16 recommendations which council staff have proposed in pages 28 to 29 if council chooses to support this. Community engagement is a cornerstone of our firm. We have community engagement specialists, and we undertake door knocking, surveys, fact sheets, and one-on-one meetings on actual requests. So we actually pride ourselves on detailed and thorough community engagement processes. I'm happy to take questions on these if you like. The rezoning process, as you would appreciate, we're at step 1. Well, having said that, we're not even at step 1. We haven't submitted this to the Minister yet. We propose to do so soon. This rezoning process, as you will have experienced, can take between 12 and 18 months from the date of initiation. That is a long lead time. And that's why I say we're happy to defer our investigations to mid-March, mid this year. The initiation process, so if we were to lodge our proposal to initiate tomorrow, by the time we go through the state code control group, which is a plus process, potentially considered by the State Planning Commission and then considered by the Minister, we will lose 2 months in that process, guaranteed. That's before we even start investigations. So that's why we're keen to have in principle support from Council to start the process. We're happy to agree to Council's conditions regarding investigations. We're also happy to agree to tie into the timing of other projects, which the Council reports will be resolved in around mid this year. So we're happy to start our real engagement processes, our real investigations until mid this year. So, for example, that's the second step there. So under the second row where we refer to preparation and investigations, more than happy to have that deferred until mid-2024 to await Council's report. But it's important to the landowner to at least have confidence to say, in principle, we're okay with this process. Again, fully funded by the landowner, certainly looking to fund infrastructure. Again, inform Council of our milestones, happy to come here on a regular basis. And also happy to refer to Council 16 dot point, which refers to off-site infrastructure as well. The last key page, the state's Greater Adelaide Regional Plan discussion paper identifies this site as part of the growth area investigations. Council's own draft Southern Rural Areas discussion document where it refers to the Greenbelt issues, transit-oriented development, and the Southern Sports Precinct. And I'll read a sentence from the paper, from the Council agenda on page 27, the last paragraph, which we're quite happy with. The paper quotes, as can be seen from the above-mentioned discussions in the Council report, these three issues are critical to the future of the Southern Rural Areas project and can be likely reasonably resolved by mid-2024. And that's why I say we're happy to defer or delay our investigations for the investigations until that period. The reality is we won't get the Minister's approval until about then in any case. With respect to the Greenbelt, the owner's happy to consider a Greenbelt on a portion of the land which can link to a future sports precinct if that's still proposed. With respect to transport-orientated development, I made the comment that this master plan zone gives Council, the state, flexibility in respect to density. Having said that, you know, and I mentioned up to 3 stories. When planning authorities typically talk about transit-orientated development, they talk about increased densities around train stations, which we're supportive, makes great planning sense. We believe our zone can achieve this. If you're after higher densities, as in typically what you would see in urban corridor zones along Prospect Road or other sites, we would suggest you're not going to get that 1.5 k's away from a train station. So there is enough flexibility built in the proposed master plan zone to deal with the issues of the Southern Sports Precinct linkage, greater densities and actually Greenbelt. We're quite open-minded to investigate those actual linkages, and if the timing is around mid-2024, we're more than happy to accept the Council condition which says the detailed investigations of that second stage of preparation and investigations, we won't commence until 2024, which doesn't greatly impact on our work program. And again, the owners waited 12 to 18 months before even lodging this, so I'm sure she's happy to wait another few months. But it's important to get Council, from our perspective, Council in principle support for where we're heading, and to work actually collaboratively with the State Commission and Council. Any questions?
Thanks, Grazia. Councillor Koch.
Yeah, I've got 2 questions. You've linked this with Oleander Waters. You've said this is an extension of Oleander Waters. Where are we up to with Oleander Waters and its rollout? From my understanding, we're not quite there yet. So what's the rationale behind opening up more land when we haven't actually filled up the existing land?
We're not the planning consultants for that site. That's been managed by the Vicar Development Group. But that plan on your screen has come from the state government website. So that, as I understand it, that's the land division already submitted to council of the state. I think council planners might be able to provide more detail, but it's essentially that development is being rolled out, and that's now, that land division pattern is right onto our subject site's doorstep.
Yeah, thanks, Cozy. I'll just defer to Andrew for a moment.
Right, okay. The latest is that, as you probably see on the ground, they're actively developing those final stages. The expectation we've been given is that we should see the final stages developed largely in the next 2 years. I'm happy if Wendy's got any further information on that, but that's my understanding. 2 years we'll see it largely developed, 3 at a pinch, but we've been told that some of the additional growth pressures they've had down there have been because of the lack of lot release up at Gawler East. So there's been people who have just basically churned through there and bought land down at this area. So it's rapidly being developed, as you can see on the ground.
Yeah, the other question is, in our agenda we've got the new proposed bushfire hazard overlay. Where does this development sit on that overlay? Does it sit in the medium bushfire hazard area or urban? I can't tell from that. and yeah, that's the first question. Where does it sit?
I can't recall where it sits in respect to the ministerial bushfire overlay code amendment. We'll have to comply with that code amendment because that's a ministerial, so we don't have a lot of choice. So whatever the minister tells us to comply with, we'll have to comply. Part of the investigations, I think in Council's 16 dot points, by memory refers to a bushfire assessment, so we'll have to undertake that for the rezoning.
Yeah, the question I ask is that some of the requirements, if it's in the medium, is that you need larger blocks and more water stored to fight fires. So, if you're talking about I don't know if you would said high density or medium density with 3 stories, etc., that could be prone to bushfire issues, and which I'm very concerned about after the Pinery fire and the Hillier fire that came right up to Hillier, which is just across the road. So there really might be my concerns after reading this document now. Thank you.
Certainly, all I can say is bushfire issues will have to be investigated during the rezoning, and we'll have to link in with the ministerial code amendment, the overlay. The reference to 3 stories is extracted from the master plan and neighbourhood zone. I'm not proposing we would get 3 stories on that site. It's just to highlight that zone gives council and the state a fair amount of flexibility on what type of densities we can achieve.
Thank you. Have we got any more questions? Councillor Shanks? No worries. Any other? Yeah, Councillor Hughes?
Yeah, just wondering whether we can get the staff's sort of response to what's been said as well. Thanks.
Chris, would you like to speak? No worries. Do we have any more questions for Grazio before he sits back down? Anyone? No, that's okay. Chris? Yep, no worries.
Okay, thank you through the chair. We saw 71 Coventry Road as a very strategic site in the southern rural area, and I suppose what we wanted was to not rush ahead with development that would compromise the future outcomes for the southern rural areas. And in fact, at our last meeting of the council, we actually looked at a letter from the Planning Commission, and they said that there were very serious issues regarding their land or Renewal SA's land immediately adjacent to this particular site, and particularly they wanted, Renewal SA wanted, not us, to look at moving Cutler Station further north. They wanted us to do further investigations about Sports Precinct, and also they needed to do further work on actually where a Greenbelt and Northern Parklands would be. So they wrote to us. We, as the council, resolved that we would halt or delay our southern rural areas engagement while those issues were resolved. We've got a meeting with the Planning Commission on the 1st of March where we're going to take these issues forward and hopefully get some form of resolution. We're not saying that this is a bad thing to rezone this to master plan neighbourhood, but we think it's just too early to do it till those issues are resolved by the Planning Commission and by us. We'll bring those resolutions back here. So I think we've agreed with the Planning Commission's request to delay our consultation. I think what we should be able to do here is delay the code amendment till these issues are resolved. We're suggesting they're going to be resolved in mid-June. So it's probably a matter, it could be a matter of amending some of the recommendations. I've put that on the floor just so that we actually can go ahead with resolving those issues about where the station is, where the sports precinct actually is going to be, and the Northern Parklands, so we don't have various things crossing over each other and we get a clear planning outcome. So I suppose it is possible to amend the recommendations there, or simply for Grazio to come back in 3 to 4 months' time when we think those issues are largely resolved and we start on a clean sheet on this one. So there's a number of ways forward.
Thanks, Chris. I'll just ask if there's any questions for Chris, first of all. Mayor Redman.
So you're saying that the issues will be resolved in mid-2024, and will you work collaboratively with the GONUS group?
Yeah, no problem.
Some more questions? Yeah, Councillor Hughes.
So my understanding, Grazio said that they won't put the application in until mid-June or middle of the year, but they sort of want to try and speed up the process. But I'm not an expert in this area, and I probably want Chris to answer this. But if I think this will be slow anyway, so yeah, I can see the reason for the delay. But is that your understanding too, Chris, that Grazio not proceeding until mid, I don't really want to use Councillor Koch's term of cart before the horse and things like that, but it's sort of, that's how it sort of seems to me anyway.
Well, Grazio will know that there's a blockage in the Minister's office with all these code amendments, issues around GARP, people wanting more rezonings, so things don't get done as quickly as they should. But I think we have gotten into a problem in the past regarding the Bunnings Code Amendment, where we gave in principle support. We actually said we give in principle support, and then I turned around and there were hundreds, and almost, not 50 or 60 people really angry with us because we'd given in principle support. So what we're recommending with the Angle Vale Code Amendment is we support further investigations. So that is probably a good way forward. we didn't recommend it here because we just thought, let's just wait for 6 months till June 2024, when we think the Planning Commission has told us that they will seek to resolve these issues. So you could take it that way, or you could actually amend the motion.
Is there any more questions for Chris, Deputy Mayor?
Just around, I guess, if we do amend the motion, what would that look like?
I might just defer to Andrew for a moment just to get his advice.
Yeah, I can answer that question, but I might answer that question combined with a few comments which may assist the floor, the council. I'll wait till they've finished. One second.
No worries. Do we have any other questions for Chris or Grazio specifically?
Okay. They're finished. Sorry.
Oh,
I can answer the question now, I think.
Yep.
I guess I'll combine the answer to that question with a few comments which may assist. Whilst I think there's general alignment with what ERPS is proposing down the track, and the question is down the track now or is it in 6 months' time? That's kind of the question we're talking about. But I guess one of the things we need to think about, and it's a little bit uneven in terms of how the minister has dealt with this, but for example, when we had I'll use the example, the Vidoulas Code Amendment, we had the minister writing to council saying, we're not going to do any code amendments until there's a land management agreement, identifying all the infrastructure we need, agreed to by council before we start looking at the rezoning occurring. That didn't happen, for example, with the other amendment we had, which was in Hillier, which you were involved with. I'm putting aside the politics behind those sorts of decisions, but I think the mechanism of a land management agreement is something which we haven't talked about here, but I think if council were to be agreeing to doing something even prior to the middle of the year, I think that would need to be on the table for council to consider. I think the other thing I would say is that in terms of the recommendations, I think it could be arguable that's missing recommendation 5, which might be that staff continue to further work with URPS, maybe with the idea of coming back to an April IES with some clarity, I hope, because we've met with the Commission and renewal in March. We might be in a better position rather than waiting till the middle of the year, because obviously time goes on and your process will be slow, as is every process dealing with government. That maybe we come back to April instead, rather than making a decision tonight, and that we work in good faith. So we add a recommendation 5 in here, which says staff will continue to work. Or in fact, we could even remove those 4 recommendations and basically just simply say that council will continue to work with URPS with a review of coming back to an April IES meeting. I'm sort of paraphrasing how it might go.
Question? Yeah, question first.
A question for Grazio. Hello, Grazio. Are you comfortable with working together with collaboratively with staff? Because I think there is a blockage in the Minister's office, and I think there could be some really wonderful outcomes if you work together. And I'm just asking you if you're comfortable with that.
Oh, absolutely. We'll probably still need to lodge the proposal to initiate with the Minister, but we won't get a response for at least 2 to 3 months in any case. So in the meantime, absolutely work with staff as often as they want. We can produce plans. I just don't want to, or I would like to avoid a scenario whereby we submit the proposal to initiate, and just because of timing issues, council writes to the Minister and says, no, we don't support this, and then it dies. And from our perspective, the landowner's been fairly patient with this proposal. So this proposal was probably prepared at least 12 months ago, and we've just been sitting on it waiting for, the Southern Area Plan, a whole bunch, and the Greater Adelaide Plan. So we think it's right, timing's right, given we're going to lose 3 months to get to the investigation stage in any case. But so the long answer is yes, we're happy to work with council staff.
Thank you for that.
Thanks. Thank you, everyone. So we've had a suggestion from Andrew that we amend point 4 that includes that council provides a further report to the April IES meeting to update this committee on the progress of working with ERPS, and then a fifth dot point that you're suggesting that...
Or it could be part of 4, and staff continue to work with URPS up until the April IES meeting. So get rid of don't support. So there is a way forward. But ultimately we can't move forward with the resolution of the council.
That's okay. Thanks, Andrew. I might just ask, is there any further questions that anyone had in particular? I'll move from questions to seeing if anyone would like to move a question. Yeah, we'll question Councillor Solomon.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm just seeking to clarify there. So if we change that to take away the do not support, that doesn't have an effect on what happens if a code amendment is initiated. Like, we're not, I guess, trying to find the wording, but essentially we're not treating it as a foregone conclusion and then de facto supporting it by accident again, are we? Because that's the question, because I don't want to be in a situation where we de facto support something again prior to happening, but at the same time I don't want to be in a situation where we're blocking it from occurring at a later stage. So I'm just seeking to clarify whether by taking that, saying we don't support it at the current time out, we're actually saying we support it.
I see. So just to clarify, you're almost saying by saying nothing, does that look like we are or are not supporting it? It could be interpreted...
Not look like necessarily, but actually on a legal level with the Minister, how is that going to be interpreted by the Minister's office?
No worries. I might just ask Andrew when... Andrew, just be able to come back for 2 minutes, Andrew. We've lost him. Sorry, okay. Yeah, Mayor Redmond... Oh, actually, we'll just like to go to Councillor Samble first, then Mayor Redmond, Grazio.
Christopher Grazio, you mentioned in what you said, which is very, very interesting, but you mentioned about the point that they're wanting to move the railway station. I mean, I've just been as I'm older, I love train rides, and I've just been from Melbourne to Ballarat, and the amount of railway stations that are along the way and the way the system works, it's absolutely perfect. But to have... to take away any of those, but halfway through where you're talking about the development taking place, is when you consider all that on the eastern side and heading out towards Angle Vale and especially the development before that we were talking about there, that's a perfect place for another station, not to take one of the others away. And then you're getting the walking distance part in order. Has that been considered?
I certainly wasn't promoting removing stations. We would greatly support a new station. If we can get the state to build a new station, we would say yes. Yeah.
Thanks. I'm going to go to Councillor Hennessy. Councillor Hennessy, what?
Yeah, I'm going to test the waters here. I actually like the original 4 plus the suggestion of a 5th saying staff to continue to work with the UPS, coming back to us in April with an update. The reason I do that is that the 4th point, which we're talking about trying to amend, says Council does not support this proposal at this time. And I don't mind if we have to bold that particular phrase. We are working well with the state government. We are working well with Renewal SA and the Commissioner. We are doing this in a very clear, strategic way. We're sending out very clear signals to our residents, to the state government and to developers that this is what we're working on. I understand how frustrating it must be for developers with the Minister's office, but we are working in good faith. And what we're saying is this is just a little early. Let us sit down with Renewal SA and Commissioner and get some more information, and then we'll come back and work with you. For that reason, I would like to suggest that we do the 4 existing and the 5th paragraph, which is simply something like staff continue to work with UPS and then report back to IES in April on an update.
Thanks, Councillor Hennessy. I'm just going to ask the minute taker just to, if we can get the original, maybe we could just keep that one, just keep that copy and pasted for now. If we could have the original recommendation put there, if that's possible. No stress, no rush. just so we all know what we're looking at the moment. And then Councillor Hennessy, once Megan's finished writing that out, if you could read out what you'd like to write for the 5th point. We'll just wait for Megan to complete that paragraph. Yes, she's doing a very good job over there. Fantastic. Thank you. So then the 5th, if you've got some words that you'd like to read.
I'm happy to get the acting CEO to help, but I think his words were staff to continue to work with the UPS and report back to the April IES on an updated... Please help.
Yeah, I think you've got it basically right. Staff to continue to work with URPS and report back to the April IES on further negotiations with Planning Commission and Renewal SA with a view to providing support for the code amendment. To that effect. No? Don't like the last bit?
No.
Oh, well, further report. So, yeah, after Renewal SA, full stop.
You're moving that, Councillor Hennessy. So are you happy with the current wording? So just so everyone's clear what the motion is moved at the moment, it's the original motion plus the 5th dot point. Are you happy with that, Councillor Hennessy? So I'm looking for a seconder for that. Councillor Solomon, would you like to speak?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to support that slight amendment there by Councillor Hennessy, and thank you to Gracia for coming out and speaking to us about this. You know, with the greatest respect to the proponent, I think, unfortunately, it's still not quite the right time to move forward with this. It may very well come back that this is exactly what we want to occur on that block of land in this area. But to me, there's still so many unknowns in there, especially we're going out with this SRA consultation paper. I think it would be a little bit disingenuous to the community to say, we're coming out to consult with you now about what you would like for this region, except for this block of land here, because we've had a proposal for a code amendment there. So I just want to ensure that we're taking a really holistic view to this. As was stated, it might very well come back that this is exactly the kind of development that we want in there, and if that's the case, we want to make sure that we're actually working really effectively with the proponent to do that, and that we're not saying to the proponent that this is something we don't want, or that that there isn't a possibility to work together on this in the future. However, there's still a lot of unknowns in terms of infrastructure, particularly that more I understand when we talk about code amendments, we are talking about infrastructure in relation to the specific rezoning. When we're looking at the SRA consultation plan that we currently have, we're talking about infrastructure in regard to the entire region, with that input from our community and with that input from those important stakeholders as well. I think that's a really important aspect of this, that whatever is happening on this particular parcel of land, when it is rezoned, is helping to feed into the infrastructure needs of that broader zoning there, and that we are looking to achieve all of the goals that we're setting out there, which is maintaining that buffer in there, but also providing that housing in the way that the state government envisions in the GARP along the rail corridor. We have the rail corridor itself could move. There's some things around water requirements as well, which is affecting, Orleana waters as well. We need to take that into consideration. So to me, prefer the motion that Councillor Hennessy has put up for those reasons, and so we'll support it.
I'll go to Councillor Koch and then Deputy Mayor Davies.
Look, yeah, I'm happy to support it. I was a bit concerned if we took out number 4 and sort of changed it a little bit, because that may have given tacit, an indication of tacit support for the development now, which I think we should not be saying we support it now until we do all the other investigations. We have to do community consultation. We have to know exactly what needs to go down there, what infrastructure needs to go down there, and how it all fits together. It needs to fit together neatly and a good outcome for the whole community. So I'm happy to support this as it is. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, look, I'll support it. I definitely understand the everyone's new allergy to terms like support or endorse in principle, because it is something that I think this would be fine too.
Thank you. Councillor Shanks.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, look, I agree mostly with my colleagues on this one. We are doing a lot of work in this space, and I think Councillor Solomon summarised it pretty well there, where we could be accused of sending mixed messages here on, saying, yes, we in principle support code amendment before actually going out and doing the modern day consultation of the area, given what we know state government is looking for and the like. That's not to say that on a personal level, these aren't the sort of developments we do actually need to look at positively along the rail corridor, in my personal opinion. I see opportunity of higher density living being a really good opportunity to get higher density living, but also get good social open space outcomes throughout. And that's not a formula that is new to the world. It's just not one that I believe we apply here in South Australia as much as we should. And again, I can only give my personal opinion on that, because speaking on behalf of the ratepayers that elected me and expect me to speak on behalf of them, there's a process missing here where we haven't got their data in such a way. That said, there's a lot of ratepayers that I'm sure would listen in and say, we've told you, we've told you, we've told you, over and over again. And look, I don't disagree necessarily, but we have committed to the process we're taking with the Southern Rural Area, and this council has committed to that. And that reactive, proponent-led code amendment, and I think we can all agree, lessons learnt on approving in principle what that can send as a message, because we are people, we do learn these things. I looked at the Vidulis matter as, yeah, look, in principle support you going out and getting the data, which is what I could state again tonight. But how that could be taken is what we're a little bit learned on, I guess. And in relation to the bushfire hazard overlay, the item 7.5 we'll be talking to tonight, just to answer Councillor Koch's question, general risk is where this particular parcel of land sits in that overlay. So yeah, I think this is a good way forward. I think it is a good way to talk about it again in April, because this isn't a motion to say we're closed for business, and I really want to make that clear to the proponent, because I am excited to this sort of innovative thinking and the opportunities for integration with southern sporting precincts, rail corridors and the like, but there's some missing dot points there that we do need to run to ground first.
Is there any more discussion? Just a few points from me. I think this has been a really good discussion. I think there's some really important work going on in the background with the Greater Adelaide Regional Plan, and a lot of work that's been done with our Southern Rural Area Plan, and it feels like we're just about there, where we're almost to that stage where we're ready to take that out to the community, and same with the state government level. So while I genuinely agree that a lot of the stuff that has been put forward by the proponent in principle support for the community, I just think that we just need to wait that little bit longer. And I'm very, very happy, Grazio, that you've sort of accepted that we can work together over the coming months. As Councillor Shank said, this isn't dead in the water now. I think this is definitely a way forward and look forward to the discussions to come. So is everyone understanding what we're voting on at the moment with that slightly amended motion? No worries. So Councillor Hennessy, you happy for me to put that? I'm going to put that motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Now, I'm aware we still have one more presentation, but I might suggest we just have a quick 10-minute break for everyone to stretch their legs. So we'll come back here at 9:15. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Councillor Samble. Okay, thanks everyone for that. We're going to move to item 7.4. 4, yes. 158 Anglevale Road, Evanston Gardens Code Amendment. Now we've got Ryan here from Acoustics who's going to be providing a presentation on behalf of the designated entity. Ryan, if you just like to turn your mic on. Thank you. You've got the floor.
Thank you, and yes, I guess the purpose of my presentation, I won't repeat a lot of, I guess, the officer's report. Generally, we're in agreement. We've been in consultation with Council. In fact, Council were the first ones we spoke to back in September, and since then we've met with the co-control group as well as part of very early engagement on what we call a proponent-initiated code amendment. So, just for those who don't know me, Ryan Moyle, Senior Associate at Acoustics. We've worked across a number of code amendments. I think it's the first one for Gawler, but we're representing, I guess, the landowner here, Stavrula Staniff. The family's held the land since the 60s. So she's in her 90s, so we're primarily working with son Thomas and grandson Daniel. And I guess they've always envisaged that potentially this land might be developed, as part of the town in the future. So, as I sort of stated, we're generally in agreement with the recommendations and comments within the officer's report. And before I sort of get into my presentation, we sort of just also like to state, in terms of the investigations, I think there's 12 that I've listed there. We've got some additional ones which I'll take you through as well. And oddly enough, one of them is a bushfire. So I also might circle back to this, but I've been hearing your conversation on the previous code amendment around the wording in relation to in principle support and supporting and whatnot. I've got some other, just because of the letter itself sort of says, the way I read it, sort of it says council does not specifically support the code amendment. I don't know, my interpretation is sort of a bit negative rather than a neutral sort of position. So I'll just sort of put that out there. But understand the history behind you wanting to go in that direction. Look, I won't dwell on this too much, but we're obviously undertaking what's called a proponent-initiated code amendment. We're in that first phase at the top there, in initiation. I should state as well, we have prepared the proposal to initiate and lodge that with the Minister. And essentially aligned with the comments made by Grazio, there's a huge backlog we're experiencing in the Minister's office. Unfortunately, some proposals to initiate requests have taken up to 12 months. We sort of get that in, and then we've obviously sent that letter to Council. We've notified the co-control group that once the response is received from Council, we'll package that back in and pass that through to the co-control group, but also to the Minister's office directly. So the affected area is located just to the west of Carbethan Reserve. It is 7.3 hectares roughly, and as you know, sort of on that edge of Evanston Gardens. So we've got primary access from Anglevale Road. I note this is probably an outdated slide. I might have saved a different version here, but Hillier Park Code Amendment been approved and gazetted. Is located approximately 800 metres to the northeast. We are located within the planned urban lands to 2045 as per the current 30-year plan. So that's sort of reflective of the current deferred urban zone that applies to approximately 70% of the site. There is a slither, I'll show you in a second, a zoning plan, a slither of rural land located to the west of the site, which is, I guess, what we consider a zoning anomaly. Typically, zoning should follow property boundaries. As you'd imagine, to develop the slither of land for rural purposes, quite challenging. So yeah, as I sort of stated, the landowners really sort of keen to look to explore developing their parcel of land. This is just a quick overshot of some of the key strategic advantages for this site. As I sort of stated, the Carbeathan Reserve and I guess the future Carbeathan Reserve is such an important component of this development, and we essentially see it as a way to bookend what is a significant investment and a regional recreation precinct. As I sort of mentioned, the Helia Park Code Amendment just off to the left there. We've got other land within Deferred Urban Zone to the south of Engelvale Road. There's other future development areas that this site again can leverage off, including the Suburban Activity or Future Suburban Activity Centre, which is also zoned for that purpose. And again, I guess it could probably create that sort of catalyst for the land that's already within that deferred urban area and therefore designated as a, I guess, future growth. So as I sort of stated, we've lodged that proposal to initiate to the Minister just prior to Christmas. And yeah, so we're just sort of waiting to hear back on any sort of feedback before it actually goes off to the Minister's office. We haven't undertaken those further investigations at this stage. I guess the difficulty with these processes is seeking that reassurance before going in. It's a significant investment to undertake a code amendment. So to seek that reassurance that there's, I guess, general strategic alignment and support, both at the council level, but at state level as well. This timing is purely indicative. As I sort of stated, we're really bound by the speed in which the Minister can look at this. But this is, I guess, an aspirational timeline. So from a consultation perspective, I probably likely see it occurring, after mid-year. So just in terms of the current framework and what we're sort of proposing as part of the code amendment, but also the investigations. So I'll probably just reflect with the previous discussions around some key overlays. So that we're in the Hazards Bushfire General overlay here. We've got the regulated and significant tree overlay as well. There are some vegetation on site which we intend to survey. The rest of the other overlays, I guess we're all, be considered as part of those investigations. But, generally we're not proposing to change any of these, perhaps except for explore alternatives for the Hazards Bushfire General Overlay in accordance with the statewide code amendment. So this is the current zoning. As you can see, it's quite odd to have a zone sort of traverse a single parcel, but you believe it or not, it occurs very frequently. Obviously to use, essentially deferred urban is there to, I guess, future-proof land for the time when it's ready to be developed. The current land can be used for sort of low-scale agricultural, horticultural activities. But once that sort of deferred urban land would be rezoned, you're left with a sort of a slither of rural zone. So therefore, we're proposing to rezone the entire affected area, I guess shown there, to master plan neighbourhood zone. We will, as part of the future code amendment, a draft code amendment, explore other type of zones, but I guess the master plan neighbourhood zone is most suited, it's very, I guess it's consistent with applications of other zones within growth areas, within Everson Gardens, but also, it's intended to provide, really strong connections back through to Carbeathan Reserve as part of, I guess, a future development application. We did sort of mention that there might be potential to, as I sort of mentioned, amend the Hazards Bushfire Overlay to a Bushfire Urban Interface Overlay. This will be subject to bushfire advice, but I note that the statewide code amendment this designates it as a medium bushfire overlay. So yeah, I guess that's a moving target at the moment, but we'll be informed also by, we'll engage a specialist consultant as part of our own investigations. Also introduce the affordable housing overlay in accordance with the Guide to Planning and Design Code. In terms of the local variations, so the technical numeric variations, we may explore a concept plan. It might be a bit of an overkill for this particular site, just given the size of it. But there might be a need to identify, any sort of transport connections into the site or through the site, and also any strategic provision of infrastructure. And then also, I sort of mentioned that there's a rural zone there which has a minimum site area, so we'd look to remove that as part of this amendment. So the suggested investigations are quite extensive. As I mentioned earlier, we generally agree with the recommendations of the officer's report. I should sort of state that some of them are sort of packaged up in a few of these already. So, for example, housing supply and demand, population, demographics and yield analysis. There certainly is, I think, the potential there to look at community infrastructure as part of that study. We've also added, I'll just talk to the additional ones as well. We've got cultural heritage search, and then also the bushfire advice, as I mentioned. But things like, flora and fauna, traffic, service infrastructure, service infrastructure not just within the site, but that might trigger outside of the site. But importantly, stormwater, there's an opportunity there, we think, to explore how this site could feed into Carbeathan Reserve from a stormwater perspective. So, the water that we can collect can be captured and directed into the existing basin within Carbeathan Reserve or the future basin. So in terms of stakeholder engagement, very early for us to sort of comment on this, but I thought I'd provide just a bit of an outline on, I guess, what will happen, once the minister, should the minister agree to initiate the code amendment. We'll prepare to talk through, the stakeholders and the various groups, and also the area and the method in which we're undertaking engagement, because council know their own community best, so we seek that advice as part of the preparation of that engagement plan. And that engagement plan then obviously will go off back to the co-control group for review to make sure that all the conditions that the minister sets out in any pending approval to initiate the code amendment are covered off on. We've obviously got direct engagement with yourself. We typically undertake, again, this is sort of, I'm speculating how this might run out, but we would seek to do an early briefing with council before going out on consultation. We'd also undertake another round of consultation with the council staff as well, just to outline, what the outcomes of those investigations are, and I guess where we've landed with what the draft code amendment's looking like. And that's typically done a few weeks out from when consultation's undertaken. So you're, I guess, briefed on when you get those queries coming from your community. In terms of the other tasks I've listed here, again, these are all just, I'm sort of speculating, but typically we undertake a direct mail out for this type of scale code amendment. We would hold a drop-in session as well at a local venue. Sometimes we do two, just to provide alternative times for people, traditional owners as well. That's typically actually done as part of it was done twice. It's done part of the cultural search that we do, but also as part of a direct letter as well sent to them, state agencies and service authorities as well. The minister, as part of the formal initiation letter, may list other stakeholders that we haven't specified within our proposal to initiate document. And then also from council's perspective, again, if we've got, either as part of council's response back at this phase, or there is an opportunity before we actually finalise that engagement plan to provide feedback on anyone we may have left out. So I'll just leave that there. as I sort of mentioned, we are generally comfortable with the recommendations as worded. I did have the comment, if possible, to sort of look at in that letter where it does say, I mean, I'm not here to redraft a letter, I'm just providing my comment back, but, rather than saying it does not support the code amendment, if there's other wording that you might consider, perhaps does not object. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Do we have any questions for Ryan, members? Councillor Koch, yep, no worries.
Yeah, just getting back to the bushfire issue, you're aware that the Helia fire?
Yes.
And you know that if that burnt part of Carbeethan Reserve?
Yes.
And it's right next to the development?
Yes.
And you want to reduce the overlay?
Well, no.
You want to go from general down to urban interface?
Urban interface, and
Yeah.
I guess that's, I mean, that's just something that we sort of would look to explore as part of, I guess, that advice, but we'll be fully informed, and as part of the way that we brief that bushfire consultant, is to say, give us advice on what the most appropriate overlay is. So it may actually be whether they retain that overlay, or, the overlay that's being proposed as part of the statewide code amendment is adopted. So yeah, we're as much as we sort of specify that as an option, we'll be completely governed by that advice.
Okay, I'm concerned. Thanks.
Is there any other questions for Ryan? No. Thank you, Ryan, for your presentation. Thank you for your patience. Councillor Shanks.
Just a question through you, Chair, if I could. Would we be able to ask Chris to really dumb it down for us on what's the difference in the recommendation on action forward for this code amendment in the way the last one went? Just the key differences. I do know that there is some, but it'd be great just to really rely on that knowledge to get it to a level of understanding and why we don't have the same recommendation as the last one to move forward.
It's a good question. Chris, would you be happy to answer that? Thank you.
Through the chair, yes, we've got different recommendations, but we've got two different outcomes that we're seeking. I suppose the first code amendment that we were talking about today was for the Coventry Road one, and that's where we were just seeking to delay progressing investigations. And this one, what we're saying is we don't specifically support this code amendment, however, the proposal does have sufficient merit to warrant further investigation. So Andrew and I have talked it over, and we did get into trouble for saying in principle support for the Vidoulis Code Amendment. It'd be lovely to be able to say that, but people think that's giving too much support. So saying something like, however, the proposal does have sufficient merit to warrant further investigation means we don't. It's actually very, very similar as to what Ryan is saying, we don't object. Other councils just simply have those words, we don't object, but it's a little bit too enthusiastic or a little bit dangerous to say we support in principle. So I think we're looking for a form of words that actually say we don't object to this proposal and we think it warrants further investigation. So that's a third way forward.
Thanks, Chris. I'll just go to Andrew for a minute.
Thank you. I guess to answer your question, the previous code amendment has never been identified for urban growth. I mean, yes, it will be under Southern Rural Areas work, but that hasn't been tested with the community. This site's been identified for urban growth for the last 10 plus years. So that's a fairly substantial difference. The other difference is, apart from being 3 or 4 times smaller and therefore not a key site in the way the other site was, that site was right next to a train station potentially, right next to the rail corridor, and had a range of strategic issues which would need to be addressed holistically across the wider catchment. This site it's It's isolated. It's next to the Carbeathan Reserve. It's been identified, as I said, for over a decade. It's been identified by council effectively because we led the DPA process, and probably Karen was here at the time, back in 2012 or thereabouts, where we said this area and a lot of Evanston Gardens should be developed as one of our key land release areas. My view is it's just because it's got a small slither of rural land on there, that's just an anomaly that needs to get fixed. And mindful that the Minister has said that we need to deliver housing, I don't think this materially affects in any way our southern rural area planning, and it's completely incidental. That's why I'd see this as different to the previous one.
Mayor Redman?
I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation, and I'd like to speak to it if I can.
Of course.
Thank you. Deferred urban zones have been around since 2012, and they've been a forgotten entity. And I do feel sorry for the landowners because they have a deferred urban zone. They've got a slither of rural zone which needs to be fixed, as Andrew said. I think this is a good way forward. It's an isolated piece of land. I don't agree with your amending of the bushfire overlay. I think that's wrong. And I don't think you realised just how quickly the fire came from the Northern Expressway into the river and into a retirement village very, very quickly, very quickly. So I think that you might want to consider that that way forward. So I support this. I think that deferred urban zones have been around since 2012, and yeah, I think this is a good way forward. Thank you.
Do we have a seconder? Deputy Mayor Davies?
Yeah, happy to support this. I think, look, if you read the reports, I think it's clear why this is different from the other one, but I think it's worthwhile to say it out loud because I think there is a surface level reading of this agenda of just, oh, well, they're supporting some rural changes but not others, and I think we need to be clear on the actual decisions we're making here, but I don't have any problems with the motion.
Councillor Hennessy?
Yeah, I'll be voting in support of this. I think the language is always very important, and I appreciate the effort that the officer has done to try and spell that out. Again, I think we're making it very clear in this recommendation of what it is we're doing and how it differs from that. I too can remember when we looked at 10 or 10, whatever it was, all those years ago with Evanston Gardens, and I think this provides some clarity. So yeah, I'm happy to support it.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Koch?
Yeah, look, I'm happy to support this. I concur with the Mayor. I'd be very concerned about changing the bushfire rating. I mean, I went down and saw the traumatised faces of the people after Pinery Fire and Hillier Park Fire. I don't want a repeat of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Solomon?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I think what Councillor Davies said was really important, just to really spell out exactly what the differences are here, because there is a very surface level reading of this these are both in the southern rural areas. They're both areas that come into that consultation which is about to occur as well. So, the fact that the other one, the former item, had down at Coventry Road had you've got the movement of the railway station there. You've got this clear articulation that's an area of interest from Plus in that correspondence that we've got, and it's an area that is of particular interest to the state government in developing along that rail corridor in a very specific way that aligns with the GARP. That's not what we have here as well, so that's not a factor in delaying this one. Also, that there is a lot of existing existing infrastructure there, but also that deferred urban zone even if we go out to consultation, even when we go out to consultation on this, there's very little that can actually be changed about that, and to try and walk back something which is a deferred urban zone to turn it into something else would be almost impossible to do. So I think those are some of the major differences between what we have here and why we can, why this one can be moved forward with, and why potentially the other one can't. I must admit, when I had first read the agenda, it took me a couple of days and a couple of conversations to really come to terms with exactly how they're different. But I think now there is sort of sufficient information to suggest that this is very different from the other one, and that may warrant acting on this one now as opposed to later.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Shanks?
Yes, members, you might have picked up that there was a reason I did ask for that clarity. It wasn't necessarily because we haven't done our reading, but it was to really spell out the technical differences between the parcels of land that are in the same area. It's as simple as that. I thank staff for clarifying them verbally, because it is handy bits of information. Look, it's crazy how much linkage we have with a proponent-led code amendment, the discussions tonight, the G2046, the traffic integration plan, all those linkages that we have, even the conversations we're having in sporting precincts, that then ties back to the Carbeethan as well, master planning and the like. The only comment that I'll make, and I'll probably use this particular item, not that it has some synergies, but it's not exactly on this, but is around commercial development as well, and that employment land. So where we've talked about deferred urban and we're saying proponent-led code amendment for residential development subdivision, I'm not against that. I'm not against those subdivisions happening and good community outcomes relating to the Carbeethan Reserve. But I am talking about the opportunity to look at a mixed use as well, and using that Anglevale Road and that corridor that goes straight to the Northern Expressway to start understanding, is there any commercial opportunities for those commercial ratepayers that I've flagged before. Now, that's a broader conversation that I know is to come, but just flagging that as well, because obviously Anglevale Road, Jack Cooper Drive, all these roads, if we keep on thinking that all we're going to keep on doing is residential development over and over and over again, we keep on repeating history and we keep on getting more of the same. So, again, I took the opportunity and got off topic there, but I do commend the proponent for the way that they're going about this. I commend staff for the way that they've just explained the reasonings and the differences, but we are obviously a little bit sheepish in this area because we've learnt our lessons in our proponent-led code amendments. But it is the process we have to work within, and that rural slither on that particular block does sort of give a highlight of where our planning systems have not really aligned with logic in this space. So, look, I'm happy to see where this takes us, and happy with the officer's recommendation moving forward.
Thank you. I just have a question, Andrew, probably to you. So I personally am quite happy to support the motion at the moment. I think the wording in the letter clarifies exactly our position. Obviously, it says at the moment we're not specifically supporting this code amendment. Moving forward, will Council have an opportunity to decide whether it will or will not support the code amendment and write a letter to the Minister similar to our other proponent-led code amendments? Is that to come?
I think through the Chair, the best answer to that would be that if this gives effectively the green light, the consultant's already talking to the Minister's office in any event. They're doing their background studies, having a letter from us saying that we acknowledge they're doing that work. They'll go through their engagement process, and there'll be opportunity for us to give more formalised approval as we go along. I guess, you know, probably what Councillor Shanks says is right. We're not, I won't say the word sheepish, but I think we're risk aware, and we probably should be. We need to be careful how we go about this, given proponent-led amendments is a fairly unique South Australian creature, and it's fairly early days under the new PDI Act. But yeah, I think there's a way to sort of be more assertive next time round that once this work is done, we can give a more 100%, yes, it's great, but at least we're saying you can move forward.
Yeah, thank you. Is there any further discussion? Mayor Redman, would you like to close the debate? Are you happy for me to put that? No worries. I'm going to put that motion. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Ryan, for your presentation and coming tonight. I appreciate your patience too. We're going to move to 7.5, the statewide bushfire code amendment. Councillor Solomon, did you have a conflict of interest?
Sorry. Yeah, I thought I'd just be on the safe side of things and declare a general conflict of interest for this item. I'm employed by Safecom and CFS, and it mentions that it has an impact on potential service, well, I will use the word service levels by CFS. So I thought, I don't think it warrants a, definitely don't think it warrants a material one, but I thought I'd be on the safe side and declare a general conflict of interest in that, and I'll deal with that by remaining in the chamber, contributing to the debate and voting on the matter. And I think it would, I'm trying to figure out the last part I need to do here, but I think I need to say that the reason I participating in the debate is because I believe I can bring some knowledge to the area, and as a result would like to remain in the chamber for it. Thanks.
Perfect, thank you.
If I miss anything, let me know.
No, thank you. I will ask if we've got any questions for Chris, who has written this report. Members, do we have any questions specifically for Chris? No, that's fine. Okay, I'm going to look for a mover of the officer's recommendation, or however you'd like to proceed. Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, look, we've heard a lot about this already, but yeah, this is, I don't know, I mean, I think it's fairly self-explanatory.
So you're happy to move that? Do we have a seconder? Councillor Hennessy?
I'm happy to second it, but I'm going to suggest that the fifth paragraph causes me some concern, and I'm happy to explain that further.
Yep, of course.
In introducing this is obviously a topic close to my heart, and also to Councillor Hughes. I worked with the CFS during the period of those fires, and I know Councillor Hughes is an active firefighter. I have no problems with us asking the Planning SA to revisit this. I know it is a fairly blunt instrument and certainly needs some ground truthing by experts. I have some great concerns when we say things like additional costs will increase housing affordability and potentially increase insurance. I'd hate for a moment for us to think that we are going to encourage affordable housing and the people who need to access it in unsafe situations. All of Gawler has come under a threat of bushfire. I live in Gawler East. The night of the Pinery Fire, I came home and there was ash inside my house. Ash is embers that has obviously gone out. We have learnt, I think there was a while back a thought that Gawler was urban and therefore under no threat. Because we are what we are, a regional centre for our agricultural area, we're not that far from crops that burn well. Doesn't matter about the forest, we're not forest, it's crops. And we have had some really nasty scares, and some of the development that we are now looking at are going to be in that situation. So with due reference to the person who's moved it, I'm happy to second it if perhaps we can take the fifth paragraph out.
Thank you, Councillor Hennessy. So, Deputy Mayor, are you happy to remove the fifth part? We also need to have leave of the meeting. So does the meeting have leave to remove the part? Can I have that with a show of hands? 1, 2, 3, 4. The meeting, it does have leave. So that fifth part can be removed, if that's okay. Minute taker. Of course you can speak, Councillor Sample.
There's a question that, years ago, every farmer on the edges of towns and that had what they call a fire break in the paddock. And on the eastern side of up here, where Springwood is, the other day we were walking up there, not very often I walk, I can tell you that, but the wife wanted to go for a walk, and those crops up there this year were bumper crops. And when you look out east to the valley, there's not, if there was a fire when, the crop was full, it would never stop. It'd be straight through. And maybe Chris could answer the fact, why were they taken away, especially when they fringe on a town, come up to the edge of the town, that are certainly, a lot wider than just one scarifier or whatever. But I'm just wondering why, especially around our town where we still have crops grown regularly.
I think we'll get that taken on notice, Councillor Sample. Yeah, I'm sure staff will follow up with relevant agencies as well if they need to, but some very good points, Councillor Sample. Councillor Koch, you'd like to speak?
Yeah, look, reading this, I've got some concerns, and obviously I've mentioned a few times tonight. The concern I have is that some of these developments, when they talk about affordable development, what they're actually talking about is tiny block sizes to fit more people in. That's what affordable housing is. So you squeeze more people into smaller blocks and you're putting them at greater risk of fire because you have to have, 2,000 litres of, water to fight a fire or access to mains water. But if you squeeze people in, you just haven't got that capacity. And, there's a whole range of things it talks about there. I mean, just some examples, like Springwood. And so you can have this situation where you quite cleverly manipulate the system, I suppose. Like, for example, up at Springwood, there is a buffer zone to Para Woodlands, but they've actually built into it. They've actually built in the buffer zone. That's pretty clever. Also, the development up on the eastern end there, the exit point for fire, and we were told at a meeting here, is via Para Woodlands. Now, I've walked on that little track at Para Woodlands, and it is a goat track. Now, I don't know who thought it was a good idea that your exit point for a fire at that end of Para Woodlands is back into Para Woodlands along a goat track as the fire's coming towards you. Because we have had fires at Bibaringa a couple of years ago, so it's all, it's all there. So I don't know whether people are thinking about it or remembering history or thinking, well, we can squeeze some more people in here and not worry about the fire. But, now we've got this new code amendment, and I think people have to think seriously about the fire risk. I mean, we were the first council to have a climate emergency plan, and in the report it talks about more intense fires and the frequency, etc. When you've got a climate emergency plan, it's not about buying offsets, green offsets so you can still fly around the world. It's about the realistic reality of what's happening on the ground. And the reality is, with a warming climate, we're going to have more fires. We need to make sure that developers and us and the planners take this seriously and not just say, well, we'll see whether we can change the code because that might be a way we can fit more people in, as we've heard already. So I just get concerned. I'm quite happy, not happy, but I'm quite pleased to see this new code because I think it does really identify the risk that we've got. But I am concerned when people try to wiggle around it and try to fit in more people into a little area and expose them to risks. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Koch. Councillor Hughes?
I'm happy that 5's been removed. Where I live in Gawler South, currently it's a high fire danger risk area, and the residents actually know that. We get packages in the mail. We've got a fire safe committee for our street and our court. We've had the CFS people come out a few times instructing us what to do and making sure on those high risk danger days we're all prepared. And a bit like what Councillor Koch was saying, we know where we are, there's only one way in and out, and we all have our fire safety plans to leave, and if you get trapped there, what you do if you're trapped on the property as well is your second plan. But I do realise there's a lot of people in the high risk area of Gawler South and Gawler East that don't even realise they're in high fire danger risk, so they might get the package in the mail to prepare their plan, but they might not follow it. So I am a bit concerned about the fact that the area that I'm in now is going to go from a high risk to actually just the neighbourhood zone, which is quite a big drop, and we've got a massive reserve right in front of our houses. That's why it's a high risk. So I agree with the ground truthing. It doesn't seem to have happened for this plan, or it's not that accurate. There's also our whole river system was a high risk and now is seen as a medium risk, and that doesn't seem right either. So yeah, it does concern me about the ground truthing, but I think whatever system we've got in place, the residents need to know the system. It's something we've said previously about the council also playing that part in disaster response and recovery as well, and actually having that information on our website that's easily accessible on those high risk days, or if there is a fire or something like that, where people are going to those recovery centres and evacuation of areas. And yeah, numerous occasions, my backyard's had embers in it, even had the police, when we had a fire off Shamrock, it was a pretty big fire, actually door knocking, making sure the residents actually check their backyards for burning embers, burning spot fires, which was really good of the police to do that. So yeah, that is something that I don't think all residents are aware that we do face that danger. And yeah, certain times of the year, and with the wind blowing and spot fires 20 kilometres in front of major fires, we certainly do have risks around Gawler. So yeah, I think we maybe underplay the fact, and in some ways, like our house insurance and things like that isn't through the roof. But if I was down by the river, I would expect it would be a lot higher, and that would also include flood as well as fire. But I'd say both of those. And I think insurance uses different overlays than what the CFS does for their rating risks. And I think they actually ground truth it and do use different systems. But yeah, I think it's also, whatever system's in place, it's about the awareness and the communication, which is vitally important. And with floods, they say if you communicate that the flood's coming, you can actually save 85% of the damage costs by that communication. Fire, it's actually more likely to be lives with that communication, and also that being prepared as well. And just being involved in Sampson Flat fire, a lot of those landowners were actually brand new landowners trying to fight fires with pumps they've never started before, and had no experience of what they were in for, and trying to stay and defend, in some cases, undefendable properties. And there is a lot of education in fire and living in peri-urban rural areas, and I think the CFS tries to get that education, but yeah, it's a massive effort, and I think everyone needs to be involved in that, no matter what system. So I hope it's just early days with this system, because I think there needs to be a lot of work done in this space. So I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? I just have a question, Andrew. So in regards to the recommendation or the motion that's live at the moment, talks about sending that letter. That'll obviously be amended to reflect the motion, I assume. Is that correct? Because there's topics in that draft letter that reflect point 5.
That's correct. I think maybe it would be appropriate, though, that if we delete that recommendation 5, that we put a new 5th recommendation in, just authorising the CEO to make incidental changes to the letter in accordance with the resolution.
Okay. Mover and seconder, are you okay with that moment? Now, I did seek advice earlier from Susie in regards to this meeting procedure, and when amending, that's not the correct word, when varying a motion on the fly, you need permission from the mover, the seconder, and leave of the meeting. That is the correct procedure. So if Deputy Mayor Davies and Councillor Hennessy are on board, we also need leave of the meeting, which is more than 50%. So if I could just have a show of hands that the meeting is okay with that, thank you very much. So we'll just let the minute taker type that in with Andrew. Just while they're doing that, a few comments from me on this. I think, first of all, we can't completely demonise the Planning Commission in the work that they're doing in this space, because I think we can all agree that there's a significant bushfire risk. We've all said that, and that's only getting worse and worse. So they've come in and they've given some pretty harsh overlays, but I would say that's a good thing. I was saying that's future-proofing, or maybe even just highlighting the state of play and saying that, hey, areas like Gawler are not immune from bushfire. So I am a little bit sceptical. I think definitely removing that original 0.5, but I do think too that there is a balance, but I would tend to argue, and I'm sure that many of you would agree, that safety of life and property is more important than, say, insurance premiums on a house. I think that's not our position to argue that. However, seeing as the Planning Commission has given us the opportunity, I'm happy to support the motion as it stands, and I guess see if they can come up with any potential solutions, or see if there's other councils or affected areas that have got similar concerns and feedback, while keeping in mind that the priority does need to be safety of property and safety of life and property. So, yeah, that's what I'll say about that. Are we happy with the additional 5th point there? Authorise the CEO to make incidental and minor changes to the correspondence to be issued at attachment 3 in accordance with the resolution. Happy with that? Fantastic. Deputy Mayor Davies, are you happy for me? Do you want to close the debate?
Yeah, just briefly. I agree with what everyone said. I think, I don't begrudge them in making changes, but I think in our specific cases, I think there are a few areas where we could work on some tweaks, so I'm happy to support the motion.
Thank you. The debate's closed. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. We'll move to 7.6, Gawler Electricity Procurement and On-Site Renewable Electricity Update. Councillor Lorna, you have a conflict of interest.
Yes, thank you. I have a conflict of interest. I'll declare a general conflict of interest, as I actually work quite heavily in this field. At the moment, there is no monetary gain from me. I would like to use my experience within this field to contribute to the council, to the discussion. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. Members, do we have any questions for Tim Kelly, who's here at the moment? Thank you, Tim, for the report. Did you want to speak at all, Tim? And members, do we have any questions? Councillor Lorna, then Councillor Koch. Yep.
Oh, yes. I just work there. Firstly, Tim, congratulations on doing this. Jumping into this electrical mine field is quite challenging, as I can see if you're going through for all the different retailers and SA Power networks and working. So you put a lot of work in it. I know it's not easy to do that. Looking in a few of the notes here in regards to particularly EV charging, reverse charging from the EV vehicles and that. Are you aware of what the length of time is before that's actually coming available within the network?
Through the chair, thanks Mick. What we were trying to do with this briefing paper is focus on the electricity procurement, and we see that there are potential advantages if we enter a power purchasing agreement rather than working through the LGA procurement on a fixed term, fixed price agreement. Now, beyond that, we've identified the three options of potentially a solar farm at Paxton Street, battery storage and the integration of vehicles. We have not gone into any great detail with those options, but they're options that we would consider if a proponent came to us as we go through this and suggested that that would be a feasible thing to do. So no, we haven't looked at the time duration to make that happen, and I'm aware that a lot of these things have quite long lead times, but my understanding is that that can be additional to and supplementary to the main power purchasing agreement, which should not be held up in any way.
Sorry, Councillor Koch, go to Councillor Lorna again, and then I'll come to you.
That's all right. In regards to the power price agreements and that, particularly looking on doing a solar farm, is any investigation, I understand you've still got to do the investigations about working into an agreement where you can sell the power to residents at a fixed price?
We've been watching what the City of Mitcham is doing in this space, and that type of question is something that we would bring back to a future council meeting. So we're not looking at becoming a retailer as part of the market. However, if we were part of a power purchasing agreement with a proponent or a retailer that did things like that, then that wouldn't be any additional burden on us, and we might be supportive of it. So we would consider that as the opportunity arose. And I can say that we'll come back to council at the next IES meeting with an update on the Climate Emergency Management Plan, and we may have some additional information then.
Thank you. Councillor Koch.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Now, Tim, this power purchasing agreement, would we be going into an agreement with someone that we would guarantee purchasing power, say, for 25 years? For example, if a solar plant might have a life of 25 years, a battery maybe 10 years. So would we be guaranteeing that private provider purchasing, that we'll do that for 25 years?
Through the Chair. Thank you, Councillor Koch. So you're correct, in most power purchasing agreements tend to be for around 10 years, and the life of solar farms and those types of facilities tend to be more like 25 years. We see that they would be unlinked, and you would need to clarify that through the contracts, but typically if we purchase the power for 10 years, then after that 10-year period, the owner operator of that facility would still be free to sell that power and any other surplus power to any customer that they would like in the national electricity market.
Thank you. Is there any other questions, members? No? No? Thank you, Tim. Thank you for the very detailed report. And again, just to echo some of the words of Councillor Lorna, I think this future planning is exciting, and looking at where council will be positioned in that longer term plan does seem to be a common theme of tonight's meeting. And electricity is one of those things where if none of those other things can happen if we don't have a decent electricity supply, and looking at the savings it can actually make to council from doing, relatively simple long-term planning, I guess from that, not simple long-term planning, but taking the step of actually planning long-term, I find very exciting. So thank you for all your work. Members, I'll look for a mover. We've got an officer's recommendation. Mayor Redman, would you like to speak to that?
Yes, thank you.
So moved by Mayor Redman.
I'm looking at page 57 of 72. Why should council consider different procurement options? In recent times, the approach for LGAP to act as an aggregated buyer for South Australian councils, including Town of Gawler, has not attracted a good range of compliant, competitive bids. The aggregated demand load of councils appears too small to attract sufficient offers from large electricity retailers, yet too large for some of the smaller niche retailers that are contracting the output from specific renewable generation facilities or from distributed solar systems. Council staff have consulted with other councils that are now progressing alternative ways to produce and consume electricity, etc., etc. So I support this motion. Let me get it in. I think we do need some specialist help, and I know that Tim is an expert in his own right and he writes very good reports. So I think everything has been explained in here in this report. I'll take it as read, and I hope people support the recommendation.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Lorna, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to second this report. It's, I said Tim's put in a lot of effort into it and really looking outside the box and providing some real innovative choices for the council to move forwards with its electricity supply. So, yeah, I support it 100%. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Koch.
Yeah, I'll be supporting this motion. I've enjoyed reading this report, and I do enjoy reading Tim's reports. They're always interesting. I think we do need to get somebody in to actually do, so like it's almost a business analysis, to whether it's actually going to be viable for, say, a private provider to come in and set up a it's only 1.5 megawatts, isn't a big system really in the scheme of things, and a battery system. So really, there has to be analysis of whether it's viable for somebody to actually do that, because they would probably have to invest well over $1 million, I would imagine, to set that up. So whether it's viable over, say, a 10-year period after they pay their licensing and everything else, so it's a real balancing act. So I'd be very interested to see the business analysis from this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Koch. Is there any other discussion? No. Mayor Redmond, would you like to close? No. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Carried unanimously. Thank you. Councillor Hennessy.
Councillor, Chair, I'd like to move a motion that we consider extending the meeting time to 11 o'clock, given that we have still a number of items to discuss.
That sounds good. Thanks, Councillor Hennessy. Moved by Councillor Hennessy, seconded by Councillor Samble. I'll put that motion that we extend the meeting to 11. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, we'll now move to the information reports. Here we go. 8.1. Urban Rivers and Catchments Grant Submission Dead Man's Pass Reserve. We have a noting recommendation there. Councillor Samble.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is a very important one because, as I've said before, I've been looking around, the other week we were up at Strathalbyn, and it says here 200 million available to restore health in the rivers. Now, we've got two beautiful rivers in our town, and you can't call them beautiful when you go down Murray Road and you look to the left and there's half a dozen shopping trolleys and a few no dead bodies or anything, but it looks shocking. And many years ago we had along our riverways, we had humpback weirs. Now, for anybody that doesn't know them, go to Strathalbyn, but I know a number of places I went around Victoria when I was over there too, they've got the same thing, because most of the rivers are fed by springs. And this particular river, especially the South Parra, even though the reservoir's not full, it's fed by spring water all the time. And many years ago when we developed Apex Park, Apex in John Chamberlain, who owned a company, LR&M, had applied to actually put a humpback weir in there so that at any time you looked over the bridge, you would see water laying along in the river. And that's what Strathalbyn is, a classic. If ever you go up there, just go and have a look at the riverway there. And I'm just wondering, I know this is, just talked about now, but when do we get a chance to talk about maybe allowing something like this to come back? Because if Councillor Koch may be able to, I think there was one that was at the junction of the two rivers over by the bowling club. There used to be one there, and so forth, but it got in disrepair, so they pulled it out. So consequently now, most of our rivers in the summer now, unless we've got a good rain, are dry. And Dead Man's Pass is another one. Go in there catching yabbies and tadpoles and everything, the whole lot. Well, you can't do that when there's no water there. You know, it's gone underground. So I'm just wondering whether it's something that we can look at down the line and look at this 200 million that they're yelling out, you can have some of it, whether anything like that can work. I don't know who Liana is, but it's obviously somebody that's put this together. So I'm just wondering what we can do, because I think we can do better, because we've got the two main rivers coming through our town.
Thanks, Councillor Sample. I might go to Wendy, and maybe Wendy can give a brief overview on sort of what the grant application is for as well, if that's possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And Councillor Sample, I love how passionate you are about the rivers in our town, and they are beautiful and they are one of our key assets. I think just to capture some of your commentary there, they are ephemeral water systems. They are under highly modified flow conditions due to all the changes that the entire catchments have experienced over, well, basically since European colonisation. The introduction of permanent water in any of those watercourses is a topic of much deeper conversation and definitely outside the scope of this grant, but happy to have a conversation with you maybe offline around some of that one day. This grant in particular, so this is a Commonwealth grant associated with urban rivers, targeted to urban and peri-urban rivers in particular, and regional rivers in particular. Minimum grant was $150 up to $2 million in grant for one of the rare occasions that there was actually no co-contribution required from the grant application, so that's a bit rare. I think we are fortunate in Gawler. So the purpose of these grants was all about supporting the biodiversity and water quality of river systems. We're fortunate in Gawler that we've done a lot of work historically, both in understanding what the state of our urban rivers are and what work is required to improve them. We also have a very detailed biodiversity management plan, which does tend to sit on a shelf and not get the investment it deserves put into it. So when we saw this grant, we thought, have we got a proposal to put up for this? We've also had the added issue that the development of the urban development and the upstream catchment around the South Parra in the Dead Man Pass, or that contributes into Dead Man's Pass, has happened extremely rapidly. And then we've got the changing climate scenarios where we're actually having more frequent, higher intensity storms where the volume of water coming into the system is beyond that which we had ever experienced before. We've had sections of tributaries erode and banks undermine at rates that, quite frankly, are alarming. We did put in quite a big budget bid for stormwater management into the 23-24 budget, with about 99,000 of that associated with works to happen in Dead Man's Pass. So we've been able to use that as our co-contribution in our grant submission. The scope of our grant is predominantly working on stormwater and erosion control through 4 different contributing sites into the South Parra and Dead Man's Pass. So Pyle Street, Allwood Drive, stormwater coming in from East Terrace, which we call the Northern Feeder Creek system, and then through the Woodvale tributary, which is one of the most impacted inflows into the system at the moment. There's also a lot of drainage issues coming off of Riggs Hill Road, significant erosion and a huge sediment load entering the river. So we meet all the criteria for improving water quality, managing flow into the system. But importantly, we've also had a great chance to showcase the biodiversity work that is possible within the floodplain and its broader catchment. So there's a whole heap of woody weed removal, re-veg work, which will also contribute to bank stabilisation and improving water quality. But the Irongrass, which is a native grassland community up past sort of Gawler Terrace area, that is an EPB or an EPB listed community, so it has a very high ranking in terms of managing an endangered species. Working with GIHA, we have included the protection and the proposed expansion of that community, which should be big ticket items, hopefully, for getting approval for the grant. Now, there is a little bit of an error in the final table in the budget section where we've listed the Woodvale tributary twice. That second reference is incorrect. That is the Northern Feeder Creek line budget only. So really, I remain hopeful that we've done our best to try and get that grant funding.
Thank you, Wendy. I'll look for a mover for the officer's recommendation, Deputy Mayor Davies, and seconded by Councillor Koch. Would either of you like to speak? Councillor Koch?
Yeah, look, thanks, Chair. This is a great grant when you consider the federal government, it's a free hit because there's no contributing money. Interestingly, this was discussed briefly at the Audit and Risk Committee where they recognised that we've been underfunding the biodiversity plan. So this fills that gap that was identified and the risks that were identified in the Audit and Risk Committee. So this is a bit of a free hit, and it does it will boost the spending on the biodiversity plan, which is very, very important. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any discussion, members? No. Deputy Mayor, are you happy if I put that motion? Deputy Mayor Davies, you happy? No worries. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. We'll move to 8.2, Williston Cemetery Conservation and Management Plan Progress Update. Councillor Hennessy.
Yes, Chair. I wish to declare a general conflict of interest in this matter. As I've previously stated, I'm the current chair of the Friends of the Williston Cemetery, and as such have been involved in regular meetings with staff on this topic. The Friends group, however, are not deemed to be a prescribed entity or a body corporate as defined by the Act, and I do not stand to gain a benefit or loss from the result of this motion. It is my intention to remain in the room, participate in any debate and vote on the motion. My reasoning is that I can bring background knowledge of the community's interest in the Williston Cemetery to the debate. That said, I will come to the debate with an open mind and act in the best interest of the whole community.
Thank you, Councillor Hennessy. I'll ask if there's any questions first of all, members. Yes, Councillor Koch.
Yeah, just a couple. It talks about looking at the stonework. I'm just trying to find the actual wording here. But deterioration of the stonework and how to maintain it. I'm just wondering, a lot of that would be privately owned grave sites, so it's not a council issue, is it? Or is that the family's issue? You know, maintaining those grave sites.
I'll defer to Andrew.
Good question. I guess the feedback from the consultants was that it's everyone's problem. I mean, ultimately, it's a state heritage listed cemetery. We have a lot of stonework that's in poor condition. We've got guidelines which we refer to in the report, which probably need to give correct direction, I suppose, as to how individuals would look after their assets, and clearly there's sensitive sites. So it would be appropriate, in my view, that we did the work required so that we can give clear advice to people.
Another question, Councillor Koch?
Yeah, the other one is just to do about the vegetation up at the cemetery. And I note that the sugar gums aren't the best plant up there because they take out the water and nutrients and affecting the native vegetation. But yeah, so will we be getting, say, recommendations to remove the sugar gums, for example? Because that would be a good outcome, I think.
Through the chair, whilst it was a variation to the proposal to get an independent vegetation experts to look at a lot of those issues, we'll probably use a combination of their resources plus some internal staff advice just to work through what is the best solution. At the moment, we've got, on the sugar gums issue, it's more on the pines issue, but the pines there, as you know, are suffering some dieback due to rising salt, so some of those are likely to go. I think there's a DA in the system which we're processing on that, but it's probably likely that there'll be other decisions on vegetation as well.
Thank you. Yes, Mayor Edmund.
Yeah, just make a few comments about the sugar gums. I think if they were to be removed en masse, I think that would be a mistake. And I think a lot of people, I know that people don't like the sugar gums, and I know many people don't like the sugar gums. However, I think to remove them en masse would be a stark detriment to the cemetery, and I think working through what the tree health is and taking them out one by one would be a better solution. And I know that it's been brought up before. It's been brought up on many occasions about the sugar gums. However, yeah, I think that to take them out all en masse, I think would be a mistake. And yeah, I think one by one might be a better idea. Yeah. So you know, and then you could replant. You could replant more appropriate species up there. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll just go to Andrew.
I should have said as well, which I failed to, sorry, that the consultants were intending to go to the site. I think it might have been last week, it was this week, but it was incredibly hot in terms of the weather. It might have been Monday, just gone, when it was 40 degrees or thereabouts. So I think they've rescheduled to the end of this month where they were going to meet with friends and other parties, including council staff, and I think that's probably the best venue to talk about those sorts of issues. Certainly we haven't flagged the need to remove those trees, but if there's particular individuals, then that can be talked about then.
Thank you. Councillor Sample.
Thank you for that, Andrew, and agree, Mayor Karen, what you're saying about the sugar gums. The mess they make, you know, on the graves and everything. I know every time I go up and see Mum and Dad, they're always complaining about all these bloody leaves all over the grave. But as regards to the heat, they're not worrying about that. But why don't we do the system, and that is cut the trees, prune them back, and allow them to rebush again, because they look absolutely magnificent when they rebush. Now, farmers actually grow trees like that, or used to, years ago, all around their farm. And the thing was, when they needed firewood, they cut it down and they used that firewood in their houses. And I can show you 2 or 3 farms not far out from here that were just recently all cut down for the wood for their winter. Now, if they were cut down, and as Mayor Karen said, plant more, you know, different types of trees there, it would be a lot better. But the mess that those trees do, and especially when the cockies get in them and strip them and all that sort of stuff, it really is bad, because the way the cemetery is looking now, it is absolutely terrific, the work that's been done. It's a real credit. But the trees, I wouldn't like to see them taken right out. I'd like to see them cut down, sell the firewood, you know, like Koshy will probably buy a bit of it, he's got a wood fire, and timber's going to be $600 a tonne this year. You know, let's not be silly about that, that is a fact. And the whole point about it is that they do shoot back beautifully. Any of you that know anybody that's cut down, but farmers do it, used to do it regularly, not so much now. But other than that, the rest of it, I think it's really great, the work that's being done, and I applaud Helen and her committee and all these sort of things for doing that. But yeah, trim them back, sell the firewood.
Thanks, Councillor Sample. I just have a quick question, just regarding the significant Graves app development. Obviously, that's probably another one of our sore points where we see that and go, oh, you know, ears prick up a little bit. Maybe just seeking a bit of reassurance in what that entails, and it's sort of reassuring to see that it's happening in-house, but maybe you could just give a bit of a brief overview, Andrew, on what that actually is, that project.
Yeah, sure. Well, maybe I'll just go back a step. We had the meeting with the consultants, I think it was last week, where they raised that question of the perhaps vexed issue as to what is significant and what's not. And I know that was covered in the 2003 management plan, and I know it's probably going to be contested as to whether the list is fully complete or whether there's things omitted from there. The app basically, from a GIS point of view, simply reflects what we've got written down in the 2003 plan, as far as I understand it, and it probably does need some further tweaking, but it's an ongoing piece of work. But I'd rely on the new work we're doing to update that list, and that's why we rely on the feedback from the community, from the Friends group and others, to make sure we've got something which we're all reasonably comfortable with.
Thank you. Councillor Hennessy.
If I can add to that, would it be fair, as you've said, Chair, that it is fairly contentious? I think it needs to be rolled back to the first principles. Why do we need to, what is the purpose of identifying what is significant grave up there? Once that is decided, we can move forward, because there's misunderstanding and some umbrage taken where you differentiate between one grave and another. And it also ties into the possible reuse of graves. We've already had some problems with that, so I think we'll certainly, when we sit with the consultants, we too, there's several members of the community that want that clarified, and then we can move forward from that.
Thank you. Okay, I'll look for a mover of the officer's recommendation. Mayor Redmond, would you like to speak?
I think it's a good report. It's to be noted, the progress update report to be noted. We had a very, very interesting meeting the other day, and many people came, many community members came. The issue around significant graves is a contentious one. Councillor Hennessy is absolutely right, and that needs to be sorted out. There's many significant graves up there, and some of them are unmarked, and we need to understand who's buried in those sites that are unmarked, because they are also significant graves. So I think that might be a contentious issue, and we'll leave staff to manage that, and with collaboration with the community, I think that's going to be really, really important, and the consultants. So, yeah, happy to move this officer's recommendation.
Thanks, Mayor. Seconded by Councillor Samble. Do you wish to speak, Councillor Samble?
I only agree with all. I think that's really good because it's a special place in our town. And I don't know, I heard somebody say, I thought that in my presence up there the other day, 58 years ago, my fiancée was killed, and so I went up to see her. That was a fair while ago. But I found that the vegetation around the edge, you know, it might be called natural, but looked pretty bloody rubbishy, so I couldn't see anything here. I think it's called natural vegetation. But other than that, like I say, I can't help but praise and support what's being done there. Any money spent, it's a very special place.
Thank you, Councillor Samble. Is there any further discussion? Mary, happy if I put that motion? Thank you. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Moving on, there's no items listed for discussion. No items listed for discussion at a future meeting. Is there any questions without notice, members? Yes, there's no questions. Motions without notice. Councillor Hennessy, you have a motion without notice.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, my motion would be that given that a comprehensive revisit and update of the Gawler Town Centre Urban Design Framework is to be undertaken, a workshop on that framework be organised for elected members. And the wording, which I pre-sent to Megan, is up there on the screen.
Thank you. I think that all looks good. I think it just needs an S on the end of elected members there, Megan. No, that's okay.
May I amend that apparently to council members rather than elected members? Thank you. That's terminology that I'm not familiar with.
Okay, you happy with that as it is? Did you want to speak to that, Councillor Hennessy?
Yes. And I've had some discussions with Andrew, and it's quite obvious. I think with discussion we can get clarity on this matter. We did have a presentation on the framework last year, but I think in light of some of the decisions that are coming our way, some of the other presentations, it would be useful to visit this. One of the concerns in there, of course, is Murray Street and the height of buildings. As has been pointed out to me, the original report talked about stories. Maybe we should be talking about height limitations. I just think it's an opportunity for those of us that weren't here when it was created 9 years ago to revisit it and to nut out some of the details which would assist the staff then with their revisit and update of it. I think a workshop would be useful for that before it comes into the chamber for a formal report and a vote.
Thank you. Have we got a seconder? Deputy Mayor Davies, would you like to speak? No. Is there any additional discussion? Mayor Redman?
Yeah, I think this is an important motion. I think we do need a workshop on the Gawler Town Centre Urban Design Framework, and I think it will help clarify what's in the plan and what review is being undertaken, and I support this motion.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Hennessy, are you happy if I put that motion? I'll put that motion to the vote. All those in favour, carried unanimously. Thank you. Is there any other motions without notice? There be none. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, members, staff, Wendy, Andrew, Megan, everyone that presented tonight. I'll close the meeting at 10:39. Thank you.